indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Barley, I just went downstairs, I think. Okay, that's good, because I'd like to get these other two first.
Okay.
Billy Mack?
Hey, everybody.
Hi, Billy. Thanks for coming.
Yeah, you're welcome. You're welcome. Thank you. And here to renew 115 Water's Edge, which is a bulkhead permit to reconstruct an existing bulkhead. And any particular questions? All the conditions remain the same from the last time the permit was issued. I did bring a couple of photos to help with this particular property. Series of these.
Here I have.
These are reverse chronological. So
Those are
the
chronological.
stages are the first page.
I made up a whole
you did?
set.
Awesome.
Yeah, I made a set up.
Okay. Good. I'll pass these around. Here. The first one shows pre-Sandy, March 2012. And you can see all the bulkheads are relatively intact. There's some damage on the bulkhead that is would be adjacent or south of 115. I don't know if you guys can see that. 115 is not noted here, but 123 Water's Edge is. So it would be south of 123, which is 115, the site that we're discussing for renewal of the bulkhead permit. And then if you just fan through these, the next page shows right after Sandy, and it shows that the bulkhead was, all these bulkheads were completely overtopped. And there was quite a bit of erosion on the landward side of the bulkhead. All the vegetation was stripped away. And then shortly after that, which is September of 2013, you could see some damage to those existing bulkheads. Some of the vegetation is coming back naturally. It's a year later. And the one bulkhead that is south of the property that we're in on is being reconstructed. You can even make that out. There's a barge there that's actually doing the reconstruction as we see. And then here's the last page is as close to current as I could get from Google Earth, which is June of 2018, I believe. Actually, I think that's November. It's either November or June of 2018, but that just shows the kind of the complexion of the shoreline down there. And the big thing to note is that in Sandy, all of these bulkheads were overtopped. And that's one of the reasons why we're requesting an 18-inch height increase on this particular bulkhead, which certainly is warranted. The DEC has, in the last 3.5 years or so, has allowed that for a standard height increase for all bulkheads, unless there's some kind of negative impact to the environment. And pretty much all of the bulkheads that we've been doing now have this standard height increase of 18 inches to account for global warming or higher tides or whatever you guys want to call it. So that's part of the reason why this particular bulkhead is requesting a reconstruction within 18 inches. And most of the bulkheads, again, that we've done, we've built them that way. We've gone up to as much as 18 inches.
Billy, would you speak to the issue of, I have, over the last couple of weeks since we last met, to have this renewal approved and voted on. I've contacted the DEC, FEMA, the Department of Natural Resources, and of course you, and we spoke as late as today with regard to the history of the property that is south of these two contiguous lots, owned now by the same person, although we have a new survey. It's the former Bob Savage property is now called Roseberry. So
Correct.
we have an updated survey, which I'm happy to share with everybody here in the on the board. But could you describe, per our conversation, what happened with the southern reconstruction of the bulkhead and why the height is not at 18?
So that was done, and this is through assumption. I have no direct knowledge of this, but based on the Google Earth photo from shortly of 2013, probably what that property did was use a statewide permit that the state had issued shortly after Sandy that allowed the immediate reconstruction of any bulkhead in its existing bulkhead to be reconstructed back to its original condition. Then about a year and a half, 2 years later, the state actually did a pretty in-depth study, and that's when they came up with the allowing for up to 18 inches reconstruction in anticipation of sea level rise or anything else. And that was really to build in resiliency into future projects, because we know this project is going to last at least 30 years. That's the design criteria on it. And the Montauk gauge, tide gauge in Montauk over the last 30 years has shown at least a 6-inch rise in tide. So it warrants this type of design criteria to be implemented to reduce the cost of future repairs and or issues that may come out of sea level rise.
Now, the location of this particular property is on Gardner's Bay, which is a pretty wide open berth.
Yeah.
We also addressed the, what you are calling
Batter piles or
batter
batcher
piles.
yes.
And those are used for iceberg protection.
Yeah,
And wave protection.
and wave protection.
So
sure.
that would indicate, I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, that this is an open body of water that does see, can see significant water rise and damage if there were to be a
Sure.
hurricane,
Absolutely.
right?
Yeah, I mean, even those photos indicate from shortly after Superstorm Sandy, all of those bulkheads were overtopped. So they saw direct wave action that eroded landward of the bulkhead.
And those are to be replaced, which I see is in the application. So
Correct.
those are part of the replacement for new construction.
Yes.
Maybe you've already mentioned this, and I have in the past, that the DEC has granted a permit for this construction
Yes.
at the 18 inches.
Correct.
So I think the zoning board did have a meeting,
We've had one
August
ZBA
12th.
hearing on that. Yes, correct.
which I did send a link out.
Yeah.
Now, we issued a permit on this at exactly the same specs that you're proposing now already. This is
Correct.
the renewal. I'd like to make a motion to renew this.
But what do we speak of? Now, I know the planning department had issues with this, and they,
We're,
as far as I know, have not approved this, the zoning
they haven't
board.
approved it yet. yeah.
And they have issues with the
The planning
increased
department
height of
didn't
this.
mention anything. Brian Frank mentioned that he's
Right,
would
his presentation was not for the
Yeah,
plans as written.
and
as
we're
I
trying to figure
understand.
out the reasoning behind that, but again,
Well, I think his reasoning was that in his opinion, he didn't feel it was necessary, that there's a substantial bluff there with vegetation, and there really isn't a good reason behind increasing this bulkhead, that the studies have shown that what is there has been sustainable for 30 years.
Well-
And,
Well, clearly it hasn't. I mean, it's right here, Superstorm Sandy.
yeah, wiped it out. And the reason why it has been so stable is because of the existence of those bulkheads.
and why is this picture after post-Sandy so blurry, and all the other ones are so clear?
That's what's supplied.
Because you can't really make that
Well, you
determination
can
from
see
this.
the lack of vegetation landward of the bulkhead. That's really the
Yeah,
only
and
thing
there's
that's-
lack of vegetation, along here as well, but.
Well, not so dramatically as it is.
No, but I can't really say that that's dramatic when it's so blurry, you can't see what's there.
Well, if you point out the white parts that have no vegetation, that's pretty dramatic. And it's
Yeah.
at least 20 feet landward of the bulkhead.
Mhm.
And prior and after that, there is vegetation.
Right.
not so much after, but certainly well before, you could see that there's,
Well,
Nice
I just think that we need to consider our shorelines, and public access to this shoreline is going to be, the more we increase these bulkheads, that wave action has to go someplace. And
Private
it's
property
going
for the
to,
bulkhead, correct?
yes.
we have to ensure public access to these.
Right, and also the protection of private property. That's why these bulkheads were installed. And I don't think that the increase of the 18 inches is going to inhibit any access more than 18 inches lower.
Right. But
So-
I know that the planning board didn't feel that that was necessary.
Well, I think one of Brian's
have a lot of
arguments was that he didn't think that the sea conditions would warrant that type of increase in height.
Mm-hmm.
Now, we know that one of the bulkheads we came before you and recently got an approval for was the art barge, and that's in Nape Harbor. That's not in an open bay. And that certainly warranted the increased height because it just makes sense. And I think this
Well, that's
makes
right.
sense just as
There
well.
is no bluff there. There is no barrier.
Right, but there's also there's a sea in front of them.
Yeah,
One's
there's
Nape
wave
Harbor, the
action,
other's
but there's plenty of
Gardner Bay.
bluff here before these,
Well,
private
The
properties.
argument there seems, to me, your argument seems to be let the bluff erode, let the extreme waves keep overtopping
Well-
the bluff and allow it to erode.
Mm,
I'm not sure that solves the problem you're sort of getting at, which is the beach. I mean, you got a bulkhead there, the existing bulkhead
right.
is getting wave action that is,
That has,
I guess you could argue is compromising the beach there. I don't know if an additional 18 inches
think
is going to
personally-
change
it's
that.
going to change that, right.
I don't know
So
if it's
why,
going
so
to
then why would that be necessary?
for overtopping protection.
well, I don't think, given how much has they recorded sea level rise in the last 30 years? I think the number's 6 inches. Okay, why would you design a structure that's got an intentional lifespan of 30 years and intentionally under-design it? Because an individual says, well, I don't think sea level has gotten that high. No, not yet, but in the lifespan of this structure, I think it's very much expectable that this is going to occur, and I think it's a prudent measure on the part of the DEC to recommend these elevations rather than take and under-design something in 2 to 5 years from now, recognize that here you have a bulkhead that's clearly too low to function the capacity that it was designed to function in, and now you have the dilemma of trying to add 12 or 18 inches to an existing bulkhead. And you know what that does? You've got sheet pile and everything that's already been driven in, and you're trying to add a little 12-inch or an 18-inch section. And essentially, you have to engineer that addition when we already know the history has told the agencies that the sea level is rising. We should design to accommodate that. I find it difficult when Brian says on one level that this bulkhead is too high, and we'll talk about an area like Lazy Point where all we talk about is the rising sea level, okay? I think this is prudent. We've had another agency that's already weighed on this and weighed in on this quite some time ago. A year ago, we issued permits on this. The conditions haven't changed. It's the exact same project. Again, my motion stands to approve this as a renewal.
I just want to say, I watched the ZBA hearing, and I was listening carefully to what Brian said. Most of his arguments seemed to be aesthetic. He didn't
Right.
like
Well, that's another
the
thing,
difference
yeah.
in height.
Do we want to see these walls across our shorelines and see them going higher and higher and higher?
But what maybe I missed in the meeting, maybe I came in a little late, was that picture of post-Sandy. I didn't realize that that bulkhead had been overtopped, because when I was listening to the hearing, Brian was speaking at some length about how that shoreline is somewhat protected by Gardner's Island and Cartwright Shoal, and it doesn't really get the fetch.
That-
And he felt as though it wasn't necessary. I mean, I look at that post-Sandy picture, and
It gets hammered in weather. This area gets hit hard. The base is northeast, so it's
Yeah.
not getting any protection.
It's got an open fetch all the way
But
through.
I don't know, I don't know that,
Point two.
that, I think 18 inches is a little extreme, if it's
Well, that is,
gonna go up.
that is permitted now by the DEC and FEMA.
That doesn't
And
have to
your
be
current
permitted by
permit.
us.
Permitted, well, this whole entire shoreline is bulkheaded. So what
Right.
I think you're saying is that you would prefer the bulkheading that's there to simply be overrun at some point, and then
Does it
there's no
have to be,
protection.
no, but it doesn't, does it have to be 18
And,
inches?
and if this were new, I would not want to see any new bulkheading here.
That You're
But
not
it's
allowed to
already
put in any new
existing.
bulkheads in
I
the
understand that,
township.
I know that, and I said, if it were a new, brand-new virginal beach, I would be against a hard revetment, but you're now saying, we know coastal erosion is occurring, and if this homeowner has gone to, is applied for this before, has been approved, and they want to protect their property and use what they have available to them from a state agency, I think that's perfectly normal that we would want to help them as opposed to hurt them in the event.
I
And we
don't
know
think
that
we're
a
hurting
storm
them,
is
but
coming.
I don't think.
A
I
hurricane
think
is coming. It's not a question of
18
if, but
inches
when.
is,
And will it
little
be this
much.
area? I don't know, but it seems to me. You're,
Hey, Billy?
Yeah.
Is there any re-veg going on or anything that's,
Sure.
kind of a little
Planting
environmentally friendly
Cape
going
American
on
beach
that
grass on
complements
the,
this?
yes, landward of the bulkhead once it's constructed. That's a standard requirement.
can I ask you a question, Billy?
Sure.
About- It's kind of related, but not so much. I mean, I was down there, and one thing that struck, I looked at Google Earth before I went, one thing that struck me was the nature of the sand that filled in between the groins.
Yeah.
And, you know, after Sandy, it's really consistent, and it's really, you know, the areas south of these properties doesn't really have sand. It's pretty much water right up to the bulkhead. Do you know, I mean, what's your take on?
Well, a lot of those shore perpendicular structures that have been, they've built many, many years ago, some of them work really well and some don't work very well. So some are porous. So some of those structures actually allow sand to leach through them. So that's why you have a varying beach width along that shoreline. But most of the time at high tide, that bulkhead, gets touched, just about touched at high tide. As do most of the others, but you can even see if you go through those, the beach distances kind of vary pretty
Is it-
dramatically over a period of time.
Is it your opinion that the farther south you go, the more impacted this shoreline is by the waves? I mean, I'm just looking at this.
What you're looking at there is a failure of a bulkhead shortly after Sandy, and it actually eroded the bluff. So that bluff was stabilized with beach grass, and I think there were some core logs there as well after Sandy.
But that's what you're looking at without some form of bulkhead in today's environment.
Right.
And that's probably in a relatively short period of time.
That was a very short period of time, yeah. It was, several months, or probably the height of the storm is when a lot of that erosion happened.
You know, I'm all about beach access, but, I mean, that bluff, I think, would truly disappear in a couple of years, and those houses would probably be in peril if there wasn't a bulkhead there. So I don't know if that's something that, we can just turn our back on, so to speak.
Yeah, that overtopping of the bulkhead in Sandy has sort of opened my eyes. That's something I hadn't seen before.
And it's not, I want to point out something. It's not just Sandy, okay? These bulkheads have been overtopped
Nor'easters.
by several different storms over the last few years. It was just Sandy was the one that everybody remembers back to, but
Right.
it's not
Yeah, it had the most profound
it's-
impact.
it's not an unusual occurrence.
I don't know, this was in my original portfolio for these properties, if you want to see these pictures as well. But we walked these properties. I think, Susan, you walked them a year ago with me, with Billy, or I'm not sure.
Yeah.
But I've been there, and I've seen both properties. And The revegetation is very important for the bulkheading, and it's in the permit. Everything is described here in detail. So,
It is challenging when you have to make a trade-off between public access and private property protection. In Southampton, the trustees have an easement that goes behind the bulkhead 10 feet, and it maintains at least a small right of public access. Our rights are a little different, and it does create a really hard line in the sand, and it's a really tough decision.
However, these bulkheads were built decades ago,
Decades
Yeah.
ago.
and we're not really changing anything by allowing them
No.
to rebuild what was already there.
No, I understand, but because of sea level rise, the
But-
access is smaller and smaller, it seems like each year. That's the challenge.
We have a motion and a second.
I seconded Jim's motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
I vote no. I'm not agreeable to the 18 inches.
Del?
I'm in favor.
Susan?
Oh, I'm in favor. I seconded.
I'm in favor.
Aye.
Okay.
Okay, thank you guys very much.
Thank you very much
I
for coming.
appreciate it.
I neglected to ask for roll call when we started. Could you do that, Arlene?
Here?
Here?
Brian Burns, Bill Colley,
Here.
Richard Drew,
Here,
James Brown,
Here?
Susan McGraw-Keeper,
Here,
Bill Taylor, Susan Borgo.
Here.
Okay. Michael?
Good evening, everyone. Michael Chinkwag, Amagansett. I am here to talk about Nape Harbor. My family's been there since the middle 80s, and I must say I've been working pretty hard lately, and I haven't been out into the harbor until my son insisted we go sailing the other day. And when we went to the north end of it, that northeast corner, there's just no water in there anymore. The old inlet's closed up. We had a hard time launching the boat at the boat ramp, ended up going off the sand instead. So, and a couple of I seem to be the guy that lives here, whether it's Main Street, Amagansett, or now Nape Harbor. I'm always the guy that people go to because I live here. And so yesterday, we had a meeting at our house at Nape, and 18 neighbors from our south side were there, and they were more hip to the harbor because they jet ski and windsurf and do all that stuff than I've been in the last 4 or 5 years. And they brought me up to speed. So I'm the guy that got to come here. I went to the office this morning, and what we were hoping to do, and I heard that there's 3 of you guys that are responsible for that, or I'd love to have all of you guys.
Ready.
Could we meet out at my house maybe this week? Because almost everybody that lives out there is here using the house. Their house is this weekend, maybe on a Friday. I mean, I'd love to drag them all here, but it'd be kind of neat if we could meet there, real casual. It was really kind of nice. I met a lot of the neighbors that I never
So
met.
Mike, what do you thinking, Friday,
Friday, if you guys have time, you
What's
pick the time and I'll motivate those guys.
4 o'clock?
What are you looking to do?
Well, I don't know. We're wondering what your plan is for the harbor. It's really,
Well,
you know,
a couple years ago, the town actually put a line item in the budget to replace that launching ramp. But you know, when we began to look into it, what became clear in talking to some of the guys that use that ramp is the proposed replacement of that launching ramp was just gonna possibly not aggravate an existing condition that already exists. Clearly, you haven't gotten out very, very much with your
I haven't.
kids, because that west or east inlet has literally been closed for years at this point. And
no, the east inlet.
Yeah.
the east
You said
inlet,
east? I thought you said west.
East Inlet's been closed
Yes.
for years, but, you know, looking at things, there's a whole bunch of issues. Beyond the navigational issues, beyond the water exchange and water quality issues in Nape Harbor. You've got the issues that where the Hicks Island used to be a great,
Bird sanctuary, sure.
sanctuary for the birds, okay? Well, right now, every raccoon, possum, and feral cat can trot over there and dine on the eggs, dine on the young. I don't think there's been a chick reared on there in years. So there's a whole bunch of different interests that would really align to opening up the 2 inlets, okay? The impediment to that is the county will only fund the dredging of 1 navigable inlet on something like Nape Harbor. So what would really be great is if we had the neighborhood behind us as well, is to see if we can't get some sort of participation on a town level, on a state parks level, on a county level, where we could possibly partner on this to get what everybody's looking for. Because clearly, that bar between the launching ramp and Nape Harbor in general is one of the biggest reasons that the water temperatures in Nape Harbor are what they are. We want to get the scallop population up. I think Barley's here, who could very much talk to.
I remember there used to be 20, 30, 40
water
boats there in the
temperatures.
first day of scallop
Yeah,
season.
so,
I remember the
you know-
guys, Mr. Lusty, with his eel
Yeah,
boats.
Mike, I'd be glad to
you know.
talk to you about it, because you know what? This is timely, and some other things took precedence over this.
Right.
But clearly, in the near future, something needs to be done with Nape
If
Harbor.
that keeps charging through the ramp, the west, we'll call that the west inlet.
West
I mean,
Inlet.
we're gonna have a lake soon. It's not gonna be
Yeah,
open to water.
And if you
There's-
look at the erosion that occurs
Right.
in that cove there, is another problem. And when those 2 inlets were open, you didn't have, in fact, you didn't have erosion there. You had an accumulation of sand in that
Right.
area. So,
And no, I mean, I haven't started talking to the people at Lazy Point yet, but I'm sure that's got to be their sand, you know?
all right. So, Mike, why don't you, you have my cell number,
I do,
right?
yes.
Give me a call. We'll meet.
All right, sure. And
4
anyone else
o'clock
wants
on
to join in,
Friday.
I mean, they're all nice people. We're just looking for what we can do to help. And if it's with you guys in the town. so.
I'd just like to say, we need to be very careful with this. And I think, I'm not disagreeing with any plans and discussions of how this thing proceeds, but I think the first thing it really needs is some kind of analysis by
An
people who
engineered
know what's
Oh,
going
I
on.
agree. We don't just cut a harbor. We need
on
a
the
study so
coast.
it doesn't happen again and again.
Because a lot of this dredging that's been done over the years continues to be dredged, has so many unintended consequences, and I think the 2 inlets in Nape are testament to that.
The West Cut is a
Well-
testament to it.
Yeah, that's,
Well, the west, 1988, there was a proposal to dredge both inlets. There was arguments made against dredging the east inlet because people didn't want all those boats from
Right.
Connecticut coming in there.
Right.
So they dredged the west inlet, opened that flow more. That, I'm sure,
Took over.
caused the east inlet to close faster than it was.
Mm-hmm.
Now the east inlet, I mean, it's been opened a couple of times since it closed. It's closed up within a year. On the bay side, that whole cove between Goff Point and the tip of Hicks Island, the bay side of Hicks Island where the chimney is filling in. So, I
Filling.
mean, it's not just a matter of like, let's just dredge it. 'cause
no,
it's
it's not.
a lot
But you know,
different than it used
this
to be.
is a similar situation. We talk about the unintended consequences. But here's some simple realities and truths in the history of Nape Harbor and Lake Montauk. Okay, these were 2 water bodies that, it wasn't just an inlet that was dredged. It was a bit of a channel dredged almost around the whole perimeter of these things many, many years ago. Predates all of us sitting here. And for many years, in the case of Lake Montauk, which was a freshwater lake, you had this massive growth of eelgrass to the point you couldn't water ski or swim across it. Well, you had that catastrophic event of doing the initial dredging, which may or may not have been good for the pond at that moment, but it's kind of a little like a forest fire. You get that immediate effect afterwards. where you get all of this luxury growth. And I think as time's gone on, this diminishing eelgrass in Nape Harbor, coincidentally, same thing happens in Montauk, in Lake Montauk, you're looking at a succession of things over a good number of years that sometimes you need that event again to sort of kick that whole cycle back into place.
I totally agree with you. We need somebody that's got a
But-
lot of knowledge and a good engineering
Yeah,
with this
but I
one.
think, yes,
But
it's
you know,
gotta be
in the good
this-
old days when the other inlet was open and we were getting cold water off the bell buoy, I'll never forget, my kids and I were joking, my father used to be yelling, you know, don't go in without water shoes, because if you had to go from here to there, but there was eelgrass in the middle, you went that way around because all the little crabs and the eelgrass
yeah.
and all that stuff. It's not there anymore. And then we started talking with my kids, and, you know, they remember all this stuff about horseshoe crabs. I haven't seen horseshoe crabs in a while. And then those little snaily,
Actually,
you know,
they're there, Mike.
not in front of our place then.
They're still there, because we're going down there and counting them.
Really?
We have
Yeah.
doc-
Yeah.
But are they at the
In
west
town of,
end?
in town of East Hampton, actually, Nape is still like the hot spot. for
Well, you know, and
horseshoe.
it's great because you listen and everybody says it's the, you know, the cleanest harbor in the whole area. And, you know, we want it to remain that way.
Well, it is
We,
going back to-
yeah, no, I
But
know
it's
it is,
also
but
warm.
It's also getting pretty warm. And it also sort of closing in with that bar that's coming from,
Yeah.
from the west.
That's right.
The
you know.
water exchange has definitely changed.
That's another product of dredging. That bar is
Right.
formed by all that dredge spoil being put on X Island that's sloughing off into the harbor.
No, it's like if you have a big pipe to the west and a small one with the other inlet to the east, and the volume is more this way, of course, the one from the east.
Anyway.
Navigational dredging doesn't go back much
Mike,
past the ramp.
would be glad to
That's the other
meet
problem.
with you.
Great. All right.
Would
And,
you, would you email, maybe Arlene?
Yeah, I'll-
Email
yes.
information where
Yeah.
to come?
Absolutely.
Friday
I
at
left my
4
email with
PM?
Arlene today, and so if you,
Great.
I don't have yours, so if you can find it and send me a hello, and I'll reply back with the address and a time.
And Mike,
4 works for you
I'll
guys?
forward to the other two members that are on
Great.
that committee.
No, that'd be
that are
great. I
not
mean,
here
it's,
tonight.
again,
Is
there's
4 o'clock a
members,
good time
and
for
there's a lot of
everybody?
nice people that I just met.
The whole
They're not mad or
not
crazy
gonna
or anything like that.
Oh, I
They
thought you
just,
invited
No,
everybody.
but you know what?
They
Hey,
wanna help.
if this is the thing that kick
No,
starts.
committee,
Yeah.
the
Yes.
committee.
Okay,
Right.
sorry.
no,
You know, the
you know me,
process.
man,
My
I just
oysters
love
are
where I
down there,
live.
I need to
That's
clean
So,
them.
You need the
so,
community support to get
no
it
doubt
done.
about it. All right? Well, thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Good to see you, John. Bye-bye.
Hey, Mike, where are we meeting? At your house down there?
65 Nape Harbor.
Okay.
Well, Arlene was gonna give, yeah.
All right.
65 Nape Harbor, 4 o'clock, but I'll send you a reminder and a note, and then I could, once we're confirmed on that, I'll send the other
Speak to him.
22 people there. And,
Good.
cheers.
Thanks, Michael.
Thanks.
Just to throw this out there, but if this goes any farther and we do develop into a full trustee meeting to just deal with and discuss things in that Nape Harbor, maybe that would be a good time to take up the offer to meet at the D'Amico property.
There you go.
Okay, Mark Mendelman?
Hi, I'm Mark Mendelman. I live at 14 Gann Road. I am here tonight to talk about the Gann Road Hatchery project with you. Before I get into that, though, I watched yesterday's meeting and I noticed that you have an application from the town to replace the bulkhead that's down on the southern end. And I think that's great. And John, I think you're doing great to support that installation of like a PRB or some sort of carbon source. I was talking to Kim today about injection wells and using vegetable oil or molasses as a carbon source and forming like a permeable reactive barrier that's basically in the groundwater zone wherever you inject it. So that was kind of interesting. But I think behind a bulkhead is a good place for the wood chips and sand reactive barrier. You use the wood chips as they're free to the town, essentially. But they have to be you have to have that bulkhead permeable, and you have to drill a lot of holes or come up with some sort of way of making the bulkhead permeable. You can't dam it and have the groundwater hitting a dam. I don't think it's coming from additional stormwater. I think it's purely groundwater flow through that southern end. Parking lot's always wet there.
Well, I think,
The pipes, oh.
I
and
was gonna bring
there's-
this up later, but I think we may be talking about two different things. I mean, the bulkhead replacement on the east side, or the road side, has two pipes coming through it that come from road drains.
Yeah, they're
The south
concrete.
side, which is
and
not proposed to
South
be worked
side is
on,
metal pipe.
that's a pipe that's coming, I'm not sure from where, but there's some
Storm drain.
spring-fed.
There's a storm drain in that little parking area.
There's also some springs
And
in the
there's a
grass area that's
Yeah.
causing that to flow permanently.
Right.
There is a project that has been funded by CPF in the stages, in some stage, I'm not sure what stage, obviously they haven't started work yet, to put a permeably reactive barrier in there, in that flow of water.
Just
That's
that
an
one,
existing project.
not behind the whole bulkhead.
I'm
Why
not
wouldn't they
sure,
do it
I'm not
when the
sure,
bulkhead's
I'm not
being
sure what
built, you know?
water that's going to, what water that filtration system is going to capture. I'm not that familiar with that
I
project.
mean, that whole area down there, Chris, from Cornell Cooperative, not Chris, Gobbler,
Chris Gobler.
yeah. He called me and talked to me about a sampling regime that they're doing to figure out how the hydrology works. So that may be related to this, but I'm pretty sure that that whole southern end is a collection spot from all of the high lands on either side of the harbor and to the south, where
Yeah, yeah.
where Sokides comes through.
Yeah, I think that's safe
The
to say.
Sokides is the big,
Right. But the bulkhead reconstruction is the east side. It's,
only, they're not doing, rebuilding the south side.
right.
They should just do the whole thing.
Didn't they just do?
I think I think there might have been recent work on the south side.
Yeah.
That didn't exist on the east side.
Anyway, thanks for that.
And just, well, I was gonna bring it up later, might as well say it now, that, I did, supposed to meet with Ron Paulson and Ron Paulson from Cornell, who designs these systems. And in talking with the engineers McLean, who the town, is hired to do the engineering for the bulkhead replacement, turns out that, those are in fact road drains, they're county-owned. And so there's really no ability for the town to work on them. However, Kim is reaching out to the Department of Public Works, Suffolk County Department of Public Works. We're gonna try to talk to them to get them to, well, let me back up. There's work planned for 3 Mile Harbor Road, county work. They're gonna redo 3 Mile Harbor Road, but it won't be done for 2 or 3 or 4 years, the actual work. They're doing the planning stages now. They could work on those drains and put filtration into those drains as part of that project. However, Kim feels as though we can go to the CPF fund and get a project funded in cooperation with Suffolk County Department of Public Works to put filtration into the existing road drain, leaching pool, or collection pool, and then final drainage pipe system to deal with those road drains.
And that's what McLean says too.
McLean basically says those are county-owned, and I spoke to Steve Lynch, he's confirmed that those are county-owned drains. The only arrangement the town has with the county on that is for minor maintenance and cleaning of the existing catch pool that the road drains themselves initially drain into. So the county owns them. It's, anything has to go through the county to, do anything more than what the arrangement is now between the Highway Department and the Suffolk Department of Public Works.
Anyway, you guys will have plenty of time to talk about that later on, but thanks for that work. On the hatchery, so I don't know if you've been paying attention in the papers and in town board meetings, but I've been very vocal in my opposition to this project. I know that the Aquaculture Committee has submitted a letter of support to the grant application. I know it identified the enhanced efficiencies at the hatchery by moving it. I'm here to take your feedback, see what you all think about this project, see what your thoughts are on it, have you speak about it as a group.
Well, we're actually getting our first presentation this evening. So we haven't spoken about this. But one thing I can say, Mark, is what I've seen and what I've read, I don't understand what your opposition is.
My opposition is to putting a 5,000 square foot industrial facility in a...
That's a stretch to call it an industrial
That's what
facility.
it's called in the
Well,
grant application.
Okay, but we know what it really is.
It's a hatchery.
Right.
How big are the,
But
how
your
big are the
description
barrels
makes
that are
it
in
sound
this?
like it's a...
How big are the barrels
Okay, let's move on.
in this factory? They're big.
Okay.
It's a
I've been
factory.
in the one in Montauk, so yes, I do know how big they are.
It's a factory for shellfish. It says in
Yes.
the grant application
Yes,
it's
it's a
industrial
factory.
use.
Yes, it is.
5,000 square feet
Okay.
of additional building
I get
that the
I get
town
that.
threw out there, built a model with grant money, didn't engage the community. All of the neighborhood is against the project. Sorry, 90% of the neighborhood, the people that I couldn't find because they are city people or whatever.
But what you have now is it's a commercial dock. You
Yes.
have your boatyard. You have a restaurant. You
Yes.
have your storage area, which goes all the way out to 3 Mile Harbor Road.
Yeah, what does that have to do with it?
To say that this is going to
I'm
change the
speaking as a
neighborhood
resident
is really,
of Gann Road.
I understand, but
I'm
that's
not-
really a stretch.
I'm speaking as a resident.
And I'm speaking as a person who lives in East Hampton my entire life. That was
You
there.
would, you
it
would
was there
want to live
originally.
next to that?
Excuse me?
Would you want to live
I
next to
wouldn't
that,
want to live
Francis?
next to your boatyard.
Would you want
Why
to
is
live
it
next to
different?
an industrial municipal facility?
I
Or
can
would you
call
rather
yours
have
industrial.
a residential property in the house next to you?
Hey, we all have things. I have a solar farm next to my house.
That's ridiculous.
It's not ridiculous.
all
This
have
is the world we
things.
live in.
We have to just say, okay, town, we're gonna roll over.
I think it's a great
And-
project personally,
Why?
because
Because why?
it's gonna mitigate the runoff down there. That right now, the rain comes down and goes straight down the boat
You don't
ramp.
have to,
And where does it go after it goes into the water, Francis? It goes to the bay twice a day with a tidal flow in and out.
So,
So
you're gonna tell me
it's
the sediments,
flushing.
it doesn't settle?
It's flushing. You have flushing. You don't have stagnant water like you do down in the southern end, which is the hot spot that's been identified by Cornell Cooperative.
And you don't think
And that's the
Flushing
target.
is pushing it down to the southern end?
Pushing the nitrogen down to the southern end.
It's not just
flushing
nitrogen.
in and out. It's the best flush spot in the harbor, for crying out loud.
You think it just gets in the current and it carries all the way. It doesn't. It drops. It drops, and it eddies off. It's built, it goes throughout the harbor. Anything that goes in there through the runoff. So,
It's groundwater that's
it's not
running into the...
groundwater, it's road runoff. Every car, I'm sorry, when it rains, the water goes down the hill, down the ramp, into the harbor.
into a bunch of storm drains that are all along Gann Road and are cleaned regularly by the town.
Okay.
That the town installed
Okay.
Probably 2 years ago. They go into storm
I've
drains.
seen the water
and then
running in there.
it leaches out into groundwater.
Okay.
And from groundwater, it goes into the harbor. And guess what? The septic systems are in the groundwater too.
Yeah.
They're going to treat the groundwater.
Okay, so I still don't quite understand your opposition.
My opposition is that it's a residential zone. The town has put forth an industrial facility that's way oversized. It's not going to have any water quality benefits.
That's your opinion.
You're
Damn right.
You're absolutely right.
And they're spending $5 million. They're not going through the normal process to push, they're pushing it through for the next grant funding application. That's why I'm against it. Isn't that enough?
For you to be opposed.
It is
Right.
my opinion.
Right.
And I'm trying to convince you people that my opinion is right. That's what I'm trying to convince you of.
So, Mark, you're saying that, excuse me, John, I started first. The application for funding has taken place before any review? Is that what you're saying?
They have committed, they have resolved, on July 18th, the town board resolved, 4 in favor, 1 abstain, to fund this project to the tune of $2.7 million. This project with the 5,000 square, they've already committed. They're already down the road. This bus has left the station. And they expect me not to be upset?
So,
That it didn't even get to go to a planning board
I
meeting?
don't think that
and
they
say-
don't expect you to be upset.
but I just want to understand, has there been any planning review? Has there been, a design and
There
review
was
process?
there was a SECRA, there was a environmental assessment done by Eric Shantz, signed by Peter Van Scoya, that said, negative declaration on everything. There is no environmental impact from building a 7,500 square foot hatchery and educational center. How could there be zero environmental impact from that?
I didn't do the study. What impacts do you expect?
What impacts do I expect?
Correct.
Noise, traffic are number one. How
How
about,
much traffic is a hatchery going to bring, honestly?
well, let's see, they're planning on having a September 7th get-together at the Green Center for septic systems. So how much traffic is that going to generate? 30 people on a Saturday?
Hey,
There's a lot
So
of-
they're all peeing in the toilet, maybe. Where's that nitrogen going right now?
There's a lot of
Where's that
traffic.
nitrogen going right now? They don't have an IAOWTS. They don't have all this fancy stuff that they think they're going to put in here and make a difference. It's not going to make a difference. It's not going to make a difference at all, Francis. It's not. I don't know how you guys could be so
So I
supportive
have
of
an,
this idea.
I personally have a hard time taking you seriously.
Why?
Because of what you have down there,
I have a marina,
You
boatyard,
have a
and a
marina
house.
and a restaurant.
More importantly.
and the rest.
And I'm only a partial member of that marina, and I'm not
It doesn't
representing
matter.
them.
It doesn't matter. Your family is.
Makes it more of a matter. It
Not
makes
to
it
me.
more of a
Not to
matter.
me. I'm sorry.
Why?
How does this compare to the effort of the applicant up in the Cove who wanted to grow oysters? And what I understood was he didn't feel he could get out of the blocks with his
Okay.
project with no construction whatsoever. So it just seems like there's quite a bit of, he said like, there's no way I'm gonna make this happen. I've invested in a lot of projects in my life. I'm an investor, but I don't think I can grow oysters in the water.
Which one? Was
What do you
this
mean?
Sunset Cove?
Sunset Cove.
What do you mean?
He's kind of articulated that he doesn't feel like it's gonna be viable for him.
He wants to
try
turn
and
his
make
marina
this-
into a flopsy.
Right, John and I have
Not
been
that
there.
I know.
Yeah.
He's in the process of applying.
Okay,
He's
Yes, he
dealing
thinks
with the
it's a very good
DEC.
area to grow oysters.
He's
Right.
dealing with the DEC now. He came
Okay.
in with an unrealistically ambitious program. Lots of people talked to him, including
Okay.
people that were, he
but
was
he's not talking
consulting
about
with.
any buildings or anything like that, so I'm confused how that's
Not at
overly
the moment.
ambitious
Not at the
when
moment.
this is a you know, a big building. I'm just saying, you know,
You're talking
Apples and oranges.
here.
I
mean, he
agree.
came in with-
I agree completely.
In
He's
this-
not talking about doing any type of construction whatsoever.
Right.
But he's not
Well,
a town,
he's
he's
talking-
not a
no,
town
that's not
Shellfish
exactly
Hatchery
true. He's
either.
talking
He's a
about-
private enterprise.
Yeah,
Right,
but
right, but
I
shouldn't-
think you have
shouldn't
to,
a
but you know
private-
what, in this respect, you know, it's town-owned, okay, but you know, you do have to look at it through the same lens, okay? If an area is inappropriate on the same water body, roughly the same area, to put a fish hatchery, to put an oyster hatchery in as a private enterprise, if it's not appropriate there, then it's hard to validate the same argument
Nobody's
Well,
saying
it's
it's
town-owned,
inappropriate.
okay?
Nobody's
Because
saying-
the fact that the town owns it doesn't make it by virtue a better project.
Nobody's saying that Sunset Cove's not appropriate. It's the plan that's got to be primarily approved by the DEC. They approve aquaculture permits. He's working through that now to determine what's realistic, what's appropriate. And I expect he'll come back to us with a modified proposal. And we've talked to him several times.
And he has said, he started out with a lot more of the cove being used, and then he's narrowed it down, and he is in the process of complying. But his is
And in our
a
discussion.
different project.
In our discussions with him, he did talk about future desires, perhaps, to include a hatchery in his operation.
And he
which
has 3 buildings
would be putting on the
there currently.
upland, which he would have to design and propose and run through that neighborhood. And I wouldn't be surprised if he gets a similar response from that neighborhood that this one's getting from this neighborhood.
So, the LWRP, one of the support letters was from Rameshwar Das. He's the chairman of the LWRP committee. He wrote in his letter of support that the East Hampton Town's LWRP policy says that public aquaculture will be encouraged and private aquaculture will be discouraged.
No, that's not entirely true.
I'd like to hear
That's-
what is true, because
Well, you'd have to read the language.
what's the essence of the language?
Aquaculture that benefits the public good, private or public, I think that's how the language reads, will be encouraged, or shall be, or should be encouraged.
That's
I'm
not the
pretty
way
sure
it
that's
sounded
how
in the letter,
I'm pretty
in the
sure
letter of
that's how the
support.
language reads.
So anyway, I thought that was, it sounded like, you know, public's okay, private's no good, commercial's no good. So, and then I thought it was interesting because on the aquaculture department's website, there's a special report section, and in that special report, there's a special report about the town project back in '85 or something like that, when Kathy Lester was supervisor and Larry Penny was the natural resources, where they actually trained guys like Jimmy Mangano and to do aquaculture.
Yeah,
Why would
I
the
did that.
town do that?
Well, actually, Jimmy
I
had a
did.
degree in that before.
There was like a long list of baymen that they put through a whole training program so that they could be mariculturists. They could be farmers. And the big thing was getting over this idea of land leases. And that's where you guys come in.
I can speak to it. I did that. That was a grant also from NOAA. We did it with Cornell. That was surrounding what freed up that money. It was federal money. I can understand it was taxpayer money, federal taxpayer money. What freed that up was the collapse of the codfish industry. First, there was money made available in New England, and it filtered down to here. We got a grant in that program to train baymen. We did a follow-up program a couple of years later that took other people to grow oysters. And the idea was, behind that is, okay, if the fishery's collapsing, it's an educational program to try to
Look to the
maintain a
future.
different way of staying on the water.
Looking to the future. Smart.
So we did, I think, 10 people the first year, 10 grew, there were teams of people, 10 first year, and I think we did 10 the second year.
So,
Did them in Nape Harbor, 3 Mile Harbor,
you see my
and
point?
Lake Montauk.
You see my point? Why
What's your point?
why have that training program to be a commercial mariculturist if the town's LWRP says they're not going to encourage private mariculture?
Because it doesn't say that.
It says
the town's LWRP
Well,
doesn't
then
say that.
Rameshwar is wrong in his letter of support. That's what it says.
You'd have to look at the language of the LWRP.
Okay.
I mean,
I have a couple of questions I'd like to ask.
making town trustee land available for private mariculture is the function of a trustee board. Traditionally, that's been opposed by the trustees. Over the years, that opposition has softened. And I think, I don't want to speak for the board, but I think there could be an interest in a board making sections of the harbor available for growing shellfish. That's what the county aquaculture program is in the bay, which is also now receiving opposition from neighbors. There could be a synthesis there for small startup programs in the town harbors, small seed growing programs, which then could move out into the bay for larger grow operations. There's all kinds of possibilities. Maybe the board would support something like that, maybe it wouldn't. But there's no town policy opposing aquaculture.
No, I didn't say that either. It's encouraging public, discouraging private or commercial. It's encouraging public, discouraging commercial.
Mark, we just got finished
okay,
talking about 2 grant programs back in the 90s, training people to grow oysters privately. I mean, that doesn't sound discouraging to me. That was approved by the town. It was approved by the trustees.
Good.
I have a couple of questions as a trustee. This is your sincere observations, and I'm listening, very closely to what you're saying. So my first question, obviously, is the environmental impact, which is very important to our community. But as much as we love boating, the marina does have diesel-fueled boats, and that diesel fuel is spewing into the harbor, right?
Because
There's
fish
oil
don't.
slick, and it does run, and that's contributing to the harbor. So I'm questioning that as an opposition to the environmental impact.
I just want to interrupt you. for
Okay,
just a
no,
second.
so that's my first
We have still
observation.
response kits that the town doesn't even have. The town's doing fueling down at Commercial Dock. The town doesn't have all that. We actually have booms, and we have a bucket right on the fuel dock with oil zorb pads we put in the water if there's anything that comes out of the guy's boat. That's his responsibility. We do our best to make sure that it doesn't
Okay,
go into the water.
all right. Noise was something that you mentioned as it will be a noisy facility. But there's plenty of noise from boats and helicopters and seaplanes, and there's noise from 3 Mile Harbor traffic. There's noise everywhere.
So
How much noise is generated from an education center and from people who are growing oysters? It's very quiet. I'm part of the aquaculture committee, and I also am an oyster farmer. And the reason I became an oyster farmer is because of the filtration that oysters are, we're being told all the time, bivalves help clean.
it's
Wait,
really small.
clean the harbors, and in fact, I've done the seeding of the harbor with Rick, with the kids from the middle school, with John, with barley, and it's a good thing. We're feeding the fisheries and feeding the harbor, and to me, it's a positive thing to educate our kids and our public about the wonders of bivalves and to replenish our harbors. So I'm not sure where
Would you
the
want to
noise
live
issue
next to it?
comes. I live near the airport, so I got plenty of noise
You'd
coming
want
my
to
way.
live next to that if you
I
didn't
would,
have it there before?
I would trade to live next to an educational system that grows oysters and clams and scallops than live near the airport where I'm constantly besieged by helicopters
So-
and seaplanes and jets. So and I'm asking you sincerely
Mm-hmm.
to respond, and I'm not, because I wrote these things down, I'm listening very carefully.
So there were a couple of guys named that I quoted during the town board meeting that had done studies on the environmental impacts of aquaculture. Now, admittedly, this is like large-scale aquaculture, and John, you probably know all the environmental impacts that large-scale aquaculture
sure
can
they're
have.
talking
And they
about
were talking about
shellfish?
citing where the best possible sites for large-scale aquaculture are, because there's deposition from the oysters when they poop. They also it also slows down the water, so you get more deposition during, sand falls out of suspension while it's flowing. There's possibility of invasive species being introduced, which is something you raised for Sunset Cove. There's the possibility of,
That's if the seedling didn't come from East Hampton, because when I went with John to see Sunset Cove, we specifically asked, would
competition for
he, would
phytoplankton,
John actually, would the owner of Sunset Cove
competition for
take the seedling from
existing
the
bivalves,
existing hatchery?
mussels that grow under the docks.
Mm-hmm.
Existing bivalves, there's competition for the phytoplankton in the water. That's another, there was a list of environmental impacts that these guys from the universities.
What's the
had studied.
environmental impact of having no oysters in the water, or no clams, or no scallops? How does that impact
What?
our, yeah, if we don't have this facility to help
We
refurbish.
have a facility.
I know, it's
We
way in
have a
Montauk,
facility in
though, and it's really
Montauk.
decrepit.
So
And
spend
it-
$400,000 that have been spent on
From what I've
plans for
read,
this
some
green
of those
center.
seedlings
So
won't make
your
it.
real concern
Refurbishing
is the
the
cost?
Montauk.
Is that your real concern, the cost?
It's a totally inefficient way to spend government money on what you're getting bang for the buck for water quality.
Okay, but that's your opinion.
And
Show me the study that says how this is really going to improve. How many gallons of nitrates are you going to remove with having this hatchery here?
Well, maybe we'll see that when we have the presentation.
Mark, I'd just like to address this noise issue that you bring up. I mean, I ran the hatchery for over 20 years, and, I mean, in the hatchery, there's one water pump down by the water, bringing water to the hatchery. There's another pump recirculating it, and there's a blower providing air to the tanks. In the nursery now, there's 8 water pumps pumping water through those tanks. I don't hear anybody in the neighborhood screaming about all the noise from the nursery.
What good would it do if we screamed? Because we scream
But
all the time.
nobody is, because you
We've been
can't even
screaming
hear
about
those
this
pumps.
project for the
even hear
past
those pumps.
3 weeks now, and
You're making
good
it
is-
sound as though this
there
is
is
some
noise
kind of a
from-
General Motors plant, you
no,
know?
I'm
It's,
not. It's just noise. It's just noise. There is noise that's going to be emanated, and it's not my big concern.
It's no more
It's not
noise
my-
than a
the-
house
The
with a
noise is
with
not
a
my big
swimming
concern.
pool.
Doing this 5,000 square foot industrial facility on Gann Road, in addition to having a green center for no increase in water quality, is my big concern.
Mark, I mean, I don't like bringing this up, but I have to say, back when we moved the nursery down there, we had to move the nursery out of there for a year because they rebuilt the harbor master's building. I was talking then about the efficiencies that would be gained by putting the operation in one place. Clearly, Gann Road was a superior water quality, and that was beneficial to the hatchery.
It's
Your
better-
father
it's better than-
had me draw up plans, sketch out plans, and he was gonna try to shop around to get the hatchery built over there in Gann Road. I
On-
mean, this is like
On
20
the
years
harbor
ago.
marina property?
Not necessarily, I think Sedge Island was mentioned. At the time, the Macklow Fishing Station was in flux, that was being bought by the town, we had a small presence
John, is
over
it better
there.
water quality at Can Road?
Look-
Intuitively, it says it shouldn't be from Fort Pond Bay.
It's not a matter of water quality, it's a matter of water quality relative to the growth of clams, oysters, and scallops. In that case, yes, I mean, clearly, the
Estuary is probably
nursery
better than open bay.
is there because we couldn't get growth out of the natural water in Montauk. It's
Well,
too
yeah.
oceanic.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's too
It's
marine.
not estuarine. You have an estuarine situation. You've got an ideal situation there, especially with the flow of water coming through the inlet. You've
Look,
got
if-
great flushing, you've got
Well,
good
good.
bay water coming in,
If
and
the
good
town
north water
came to
going
me
out.
and said, we've got state lands out next to multi-aquaculture in Nape, used to be the bunker factory, we're gonna go there and build this thing. That would be great. If the town said, we're gonna buy a commercial waterfront zone, commercial property in 3 Mile Harbor. And we're gonna do it there. We're gonna put an industrial facility on a commercially zoned property. But they bought a residential property, and that residential property had a house on it that had been to the boards within the town twice. And
Well,
those
you've got-
boards within the town said, this is the most you can do. Because Pat Brabant was the builder for the thing. The town, the boards in the town said, this is as much as you can do on this property. And then it pops out this model of a 5,000 square foot facility in my neighborhood.
But let me ask you, is that?
And
that's-
all of the
that's
neighbors
the
got
initial
together and said,
model.
we don't want this
It's not been
here.
approved by the zoning or planning board, it's not been approved, it's a
It
design.
hasn't even gone.
Right, but I'm saying it's a design, it's something that
And
was
there's no
presented,
commitment
and
from
then you
Peter
work on
to
the
send
actual
it.
plans, right?
There's no
That's the
commitment.
That's the process by which any plan is approved, to go through the planning department, to go through DEC and all of that. And it hasn't been approved by any town board,
Yes, it
and that's what
has.
you submit. No, the plan itself has been approved and sealed, and
They've-
signed by an architect?
They've signed, sealed, and
There's
delivered
no
to build
plan-
this project.
Not what I have read. There's no
In that
plan that has
resolution
been
on July the
signed
18th.
or,
Well, I think what Mark's talking about is,
well, everybody submits
for
a
the
plan, but then
grant,
it is,
for the grant,
Bingo.
Susan, what's required of the town
Is
is
a
to
proposal.
commit to the project. You
a
can't
plan for
file
the
for
grant
you can't file for the grant
right,
unless
unless you have a plan.
Without a
that
commitment.
goes for anybody who files for this money.
Mm-hmm.
This money has been appropriated by the state. It's spent. It's going somewhere.
Right, I
If it
understand.
doesn't go to this project, it'll go to something in Brookhaven or Riverhead
Mm-hmm.
or somewhere else. This is not money
Grab it.
that,
You gotta grab those grant
well,
funds.
it's not
because
money
it's
that's
such
going to
a
be returned to the
great project to
taxpayer.
spend
Mark.
that,
It's
that
not going
money
to be
on.
returned to the taxpayer, which is an argument you're making. You've made another board,
No,
heard it.
I'm making the argument that the government shouldn't be spending wastefully, and this is wasteful spending in my mind. It is not going to improve water quality at all. It's gonna give you $23,000 a year of improvements in efficiencies and prevention of
Okay,
losses.
what I'm hearing John say
For
is that this
$5 million
funding
bucks.
will return to another location for another type of project. So we're not even in control of this. This has been allocated to our community for the purpose of a shellfish hatchery to
No,
be
400,000 has. There's a
But the
grant
400,000,
application has gone in.
it's not going to be returned to the government or our pockets, our individual East Hampton pocket. So we have been granted this funding for a project that you don't like the location, is what I'm hearing.
No.
But
You're-
not the
you're-
project
You
itself.
have to stop, because you've got $400,000 that have been approved. That's what went to Bates and Massey to develop the models and the plans and everything else, and probably still has some left over to spend. They have gone to the state with a grant application for construction funding. Okay? There's an application that they had to submit for that. They had to approve doing this project. What was in the grant application was the plan with the 5,000 square foot and the bioswale and there was no sanitary, and they had a preliminary environmental assessment.
I have followed this in
Of
the
that
newspapers.
plan,
I've read this.
of that plan, said zero environmental impacts. How is that even possible? To put something somewhere and say there's no environmental impact whatsoever?
My understanding is that there is
And you
going to
can't
be
segment
review
either.
of this
Well,
project
true, 'cause
Just
before.
push through.
my dog takes a crap near the water, there's an environmental impact.
Absolutely.
Hey, Mark, Susan, the board, if, we have Barley here who was supposed to
Too
do
long.
a presentation. Could we, hear both sides of this?
Of course, I'm sorry for taking
Mark,
so much time.
thank you.
Okay, before we do that, though, can we get to Steve and Rick Whalen? You guys are signed up.
I was really at my head in the shellfish. Now you're asking me to change.
Yes.
No, I
Well, we don't need to make them
front of
sit
me?
through this.
Come on up, Steve.
Yeah,
Okay.
All right.
The proposals are on.
Francis, may I?
yeah, go ahead.
Okay, just changing gears for a moment. Thank you, Rick and Steve, for coming in. We have had a proposal, or a pair of proposals, that Steve and Rick have put together for us to do research on trustee holdings and related properties in the Northwest Harbor area. And there were some thoughts from the board that it might be best if these two gentlemen work together on the project. So I went back to them, asked them to refine their proposals that considered each other's expertise and what they would bring to the project. I asked them to sharpen their pencils a little bit on their prices, reflecting now that there's two contractors involved in the project. And everyone received a copy of the two new proposals at the last meeting. And the board asked for some time to look them over and see if there were any questions on the proposals. And I asked Steve and Rick to come in tonight so that any questions could be answered firsthand and clarified. So I'd just like to open it up if anyone has any questions on the proposals that were submitted.
I'm presuming that we're going to approve both of these proposals.
I would like to recommend to the board that we engage both Rick and Steve and undertake, I think a thoughtful, systematic approach to cataloging the properties in the area of Northwest Harbor, researching the ownership rights, going back to the patent and original grants, et cetera. And they both bring a lot of expertise to this. So I think we're in a really unique position to have two very qualified people to work together and put together this catalog of properties with the historic and legal and title research that's necessary to clarify holdings. We have a lot of environmental projects, not unlike Nape and other areas. And it's important that I think it's clear, where the trustees have ownership rights and how we can provide support to the community in areas like Little Northwest Creek, and what do you do with the dredge spoil from Little Northwest Creek if you don't know who owns the beach? Should the community be paying for it? Should it be put on a public trustee beach and there's no cost to the dredge spoil? So there's lots of questions that are going to come up as we undertake more of these projects, and I think in the long run it's going to end up saving the trustees money and clarify issues that might avoid litigation and other things like that we've seen in the past when we haven't had clarification of ownership.
No, I
So-
think, the only thing I'd like to say to this, I think it's great if you two are willing to work together on this, because clearly, you have different approaches and different skill sets, and I really thought that, clearly on your individual proposals, there was a more legal spin, there was a more in-depth historical interest. I think having the two of you guys work together, Rick has done some of the title search work on a lot of these properties, which reflected in his proposal. But Steve, I think you can do a lot to validate some of that work and add a more credible weight to that. What I would the only thing I would like to see is sort of a compilation of these two proposals in sort of a coordinated document and pricing and stuff that we can look at and say, well, gee, this is really great. I don't.
Well, Jim, we did get to that to some degree.
You did?
So, yeah, so we originally had certain price points. They've been reduced, where Steve's original proposal was $20,000. It's now $15,000. Rick's was originally 10 and is now 8,500.
I think it was 11,000.
11,500 to 8,500. So
Okay.
we
So we're
did
in
bring
the-
it down. We've had discussions about the approach for the research, where we do have the opportunity, with the Southampton line being the boundary to the west, to literally come around the entire harbor, going from the Long Wharf and systematically undertaking this and getting through all the way around to the lighthouse, which the trustees sold to the federal government many, many years ago, and having a full catalog with the depth of research behind it. Well, right now, we really just have a catalog that's good, but it may not be completely complete and doesn't have the historic background behind it. So I think a lot of that has been fleshed out here.
Oh,
And if
okay.
we do want to establish a project timeline, maybe with some periodic reviews, just, progress reports or something like that, I think that's probably something we could work into the equation, kind of like some milestones, but we're looking at this being pretty compressed between now and the end of the year, so I think these guys are gonna hit the ground running and, you know, look to do a 5-month
Nice to get a
timeline.
Christmas present from you guys.
One question,
I'll,
one question I had, went to that timeline, it seemed very tight to me, I don't know how you guys feel about it.
You know, it might be. I mean, I've known Steve for a while. I've been in and around the Long Island collection where he's the research librarian and archivist. And first of all, Steve has a unique skill set and unique background. And, you know, he has things that I can't bring to the table. I think I've got things that he can't bring to the table. I think that's why we do make a good team. And the intention here is to come out with a single report at the end. So we will work together to present a single, you know, cohesive document that will, you know, utilize both of our skill sets. You know, I mean, I do, you know, probably, I mean, when I originally prepared my document, my feeling is you'll get more total information and more backup with the two of us working together. But it's actually more work. It's actually more total work as well. Is it tight to do this by the end of December? You know, it might be. December.
Yeah, it says
So,
mid-December.
You know, if it's, you know, well,
I mean, how
that's the
how
goal.
hard and fast is that date, that's what I'm trying to.
No, I don't think it's in stone. I think we should look for an end-of-year report, progress report.
Definitely.
And if we need to go further than that, I think that the board can make that adjustment. I know Steve has a lot of research already kind of in the bag, so to speak. He has cataloged a lot of deeds in the area, so he may have a little bit of a head start on us that, you know. So, but I agree with you, John. We may need to have a little flexibility.
Yeah, I'd like to be flexible.
So
And the other thing
how
too is.
do we want to start this?
Well, you know, I'd like to, oh, I'm sorry, Francis.
My only real question is, I mean, this is, you know, highly unusual to send out RFPs and end up merging.
Hiring both of them?
Yeah.
It's not that odd.
Are you both comfortable with this arrangement?
Working together?
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay.
You guys can start dressing.
That's my biggest concern.
Yeah, that was the first question that we raised and had a meeting, you know, Susan and I and Steve and Rick got together and really, you know, made sure that it made sense.
I mean, I
everyone to get
understand
together.
they both have very different backgrounds and.
Well, I think if
both
either one
very
of them
highly
took it
qualified.
on, they would probably be hiring someone like the other to do
Right.
certain aspects of the project anyway.
Right, some of what I would have had to do, you know, one of my concerns was being able to go and get deeds and stuff like that. You know, in some area, and Steve's got that ability, you know, he's already able to do that, or may already have deeds.
Sounds as though it's a very wonderful collaboration, and we'll benefit more from their report than if it's one or the other.
We're both very interested in East Hampton history, and I have no concerns about us working well together.
I think this
You mentioned
is-
the word catalog a couple times throughout this, and I'm wondering if the trustees should consider, what is the end goal are you looking for? Is it more of understanding their methodology in the form of a huge report where we can understand the history, or is it more of a catalog that 50 years from now you can have this, you know, nicely bound thing where you'll flip right to that page, okay, the trustees own it, they don't own it. So I'm wondering if we should really define what it is our
Well, you
end
can't
goal
just,
is.
you can't just have a document that says the trustees own it or don't own it. You have to validate that. There has to be some supporting evidence that says we own it because.
That's, I think,
That's-
the goal.
That's,
Right.
because, you know, we have a catalog that, Rick,
Right.
you put together
That's
some
right.
time ago, and it has value, but you know what? If it's challenged, that sets the wheels in motion where Rick would have to be called back in, or some other counsel would have to be called back in. He would more than likely need some researcher in the form of an archivist like Steve to come back in and say, well, okay, yes, we own it, but maybe not for the reasons you thought, because I've gone back and I found 2 other deeds that changed this slightly. So I think having that document that's comprehensive, that just doesn't list properties and say, this is what the trustees own, this is what they don't own, but more importantly to me is how and why.
Right.
Do we,
Let- let me-
how do we
let me
own it,
say-
why don't we own it?
Here's what I envision, with respect to individual properties that we look at. And there may be some we look at, we determine that the trustees don't own this. My idea is that we'll identify all the properties we think that the trustees do own in the area. Some that are in question that maybe we will determine the trustees don't own, but things that you'd be asking about, okay? And we would then provide some sort of a factual basis for that. We'd give whatever evidence, let's assume it's property that we conclude the trustees own. We would give whatever factual background, it might be deeds, sometimes there are going to be deeds. We'll go back to the Dongan patent and have some sort of, chain of evidence from, the original grant to the trustees, the Dongan patent, and what's occurred since then. We may refer to maps, we might refer to, there's a variety of sources, but we would provide a basis for a trustee claim of ownership. That doesn't mean that if you, in a particular case, let's just say Northwest Harbor, for example. I'm sure we're not going to come up with a document where at the end of the day, if you wanted to litigate with the state of New York, that you'll have all the evidence in place at Northwest Harbor. That's not going to happen. But the idea is that for every property, there would be some basis spelled out in as much detail as we can for why the trustees own a particular parcel of land. So not only that we believe the trustees own the property, but why we believe you own it.
To answer your question, in addition to a report, plan is to create a historical geography. It's something you can implement with the town GIS so that all of you can, at a glance, know what the status is. Even if it's, as Rick said, ongoing, at least you have documentation to say, all right, well, why are we leaning this way or that?
It sounds terrific, and we need this, and I think it's something that's been long needed for the trustees to validate ownership of property. So I think it's terrific.
I do. I think it's a great first step and a great partnership with the two of you working together, and I think it's going to benefit the trustees and boards going forward, and I hope we can, I hope this is the first of one of many projects that we can work on.
Well, for me, it would be an honor to work with Rick and all of you. And I think combined, honestly, you have two attorneys here, both with extensive title experience. That's really what it's going to come down to. So we're going to be looking at boundaries, we're going to be looking at titles and various claims. And I think there's going to be a heavy emphasis on land use over the centuries. So.
Well, I'd like to make a motion that we approve the two proposals and these two gentlemen working together with progress reports and a year-end report and the flexibility, if necessary, to extend the timeline into the next year.
I'd like to second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And thank you very much.
Thank you,
Very
guys.
much.
Thank you.
Very good. Good.
Merry early Christmas.
Thanks, Anna.
Okay, John? Barley?
You sure you want to talk more about shellfish?
Yeah, I think we need to.
Did you bring any oysters?
Yeah.
Okay, I guess I don't have to introduce this really now, but just here to talk about the hatchery nursery consolidation. This is the same presentation that's been presented by mostly David Lease at other work sessions and town board meetings. Some of this stuff is repetitious. It's a lot of background, which you guys have heard before, but for your viewing audience, I'll go through everything and try and keep it relatively cursory so that we're not here for too long. So way back in the days before any of us were here, Long Island was one of the leaders in the nation's shellfish production. Shortly after that, late 1800s, mid 1900s, harvesting, development, water quality depleted and depleted stocks. And then in the mid 80s, everybody remembers the brown tide coming through. And that's what really kind of broke the straw that broke the camel's back. Our local local harvest dropped 20%, as did the number of commercial baymen. So in late 1980s, the East Hampton Shellfish Hatchery was established by John Aldred,
Well, among others.
among others, yeah. So in 1986, we obtained a World War II Navy building in Montauk on Fort Pond Bay. It's this building here in the red, which was formerly part of the New York Ocean Science Lab. A lot of the area to the east now is condos, how things usually go. In '87, Mario Cuomo gave the town a grant to retrofit that building and make it into a shellfish hatchery. And after that, for 25 years, we had to give back the state 25% of our production. And all that production went into state waters. In '91, they conducted their first spawn of clams. And then in 1998, the nursery was moved to Gann Road. And we've already touched on that. I'll talk about that a little bit more. So what good are these shellfish? Heard about that. Also, water filtration, nitrogen sequestration. One adult oyster can filter 50 gallons a day, and clams and scallops are about half of that. They create habitats. We can see here, I've shown this picture several times. It's one of my favorites. This is Bear Bottom in Northwest Creek. Middle picture is just after seeding, and then the picture on the right is a year later with obviously well-grown oysters and also some macroalgae growing among the oysters. And there's tons of stuff in there that we can't see: crabs, grass shrimp, nursery fish taking refuge. Provide food for us and marine life. And obviously, as this board knows better than any, it's part of the culture and commerce in East Hampton. And growing shellfish is one of the most sustainable ways of growing protein. So our current growing sites are the hatchery in Montauk, the nursery on 3 Mile Harbor, the field grout site in Nape Harbor, obviously an old picture, still an East Inlet. That closed. The last time I saw that inlet open was right after Sandy. It was open for about a week, and it's been closed ever since. And we have other overwintering sites throughout town, as far west as Northwest Creek. Current production, about 3 to 6 million oysters, 100 to 500,000 scallops, and about 8 to 10 million clams per year. Okay, now to the real topic at hand. So John has touched on tonight and in previous meetings about how once it was discovered that the nursery stage of the shellfish growing would not work on Fort Pond Bay, we've been looking for other locations to consolidate the two facilities. So way back in 2012, the Marina Lane idea came up, and that was basically quashed because it's a nature preserve and we could not build a structure on it. And it's really not an ideal site given its proximity in 3 Mile Harbor. For those that don't know, it's way down by the head of the harbor. So water quality is questionable down there, specifically in relation to harmful algae blooms. We can grow shellfish in highly eutrophic waters, even waters that you might not want to eat harvestable shellfish out of, but one can run a hatchery or grow seed in those kinds of waters. So our current scenario is, like I said, we're in this Navy building that was built in the 1940s, not specifically for aquaculture or even
Testing torpedoes.
marine sciences, for testing torpedoes, right. Great building, built very strong, really thick floor. Navy concrete is no joke. And it's a 9,600 square foot structure, and it's in the FEMA flood zone AE, so it's in a high-risk flood zone. And as we've discussed several times, the oceanic waters of Fort Pond Bay are not suitable for the nursery stage. It works fine for the hatchery stage because we grow all the food for the shellfish that's in the hatchery during the hatchery stage, but once they need to be grown on ambient water, simply because we can't grow enough food for them, that location doesn't work. And John has spoken in the past about back when they tried to do it, the shellfish just simply didn't grow. And then when they were brought over to 3 Mile Harbor, we were getting what nurseries typical get, which is basically 100% growth over the course of a week, doubling in the course of a week, which is really good growth. It's a 20-mile, 30-minute distance between the sites, so it's basically 12.5% of our day wasted. It stresses juvenile shellfish, especially scallops, due to the transport between the sites, both being out of water or in dense situations in a cooler or a bucket, what have you. And the water quality differences, temperature, salinity, pH, dissolved oxygen, all that stuff. We figure we lose about half of our scallop crop each year because of that transition. And
What's the value of that?
the value is about 100,000.
Don't do it in billion gallons, because the
Yeah.
natural mortality, that's an unrealistic
Right.
figure. But in dollars.
You figure dockside is about 100,000, if they were to make it to
Finished or
harvest.
no, as,
Harvest.
Harvest,
Adult.
no, no.
dockside.
But the value, if you have to go in and buy that seed, what's the value?
I actually haven't even looked at buying seed. I've never
Okay.
really.
Okay, because if you're gonna compare, if
Seed
you're
is
gonna,
relatively.
if you're gonna compare your loss on the transport, you have to compare it. You have to compare apples to apples, okay?
Well, we didn't actually value the loss of scallops in dollars, just the percentage.
I'm only
and numbers
just,
of
I'm thinking
scallops.
about this just strictly as like an investment
Right.
business owner.
Mhm.
If I'm gonna evaluate whether I'm building a new structure or moving things, I truly have to look at
Right.
this in an economic sense. What is our real cost here, and what is the real impacts of things?
Hey, Barley?
Well, yeah,
Scallop
but, you know,
losses, you have 2.1 million a year, and then on the other slide, you were growing 100,000 to 500,000. How do those
That's a
numbers
good point.
correlate? Is that just a typo or something? It just seemed
Could
like
be.
it might have
I'll have to
been a
double check
disconnect.
those numbers.
Okay.
I just, in this economic thing, I mean, I think commercial hatcheries generally are multifaceted. They'll sell some seed, they plant a lot of seed for later harvest. Flowers,
Public order, in our case, right? Putting out into the public order.
Well,
I'm talking about a
no,
commercial
no, but you
hatchery
know, I'm just talking about an
that
investment.
made its money on the sale of its product.
Okay.
There's a couple of different ways it does it. In the case of a public hatchery, it's only growing the seed. So if you say, well, so you're basically forcing a public hatchery into a situation where it has to justify itself commercially only on the sale of seed.
No, I'm not saying just trying to justify this just on the sale of seed. It's just, you know, the building, irregardless of grants, the town with taxpayer money is going to be investing in that building, okay? And you have to substantiate that investment. You have to demonstrate to the taxpayer the value here.
Well, the hatchery does publish, and we have for
Yeah,
a long
no,
time.
no, and I think it's a
the
great, I
value
think
of
it's a
our
great thing.
seed
I'm not trying to
on a yearly
kill
basis.
this thing, but, you know.
But we're not
and they-
selling it, you know.
Well, why not?
Because the hatchery was
And
set
why-
up
and
to
why are you
seed
not
town
selling?
waters.
We do
Government
sell
project,
our
that's
oyster
not-
culls, because
government-
seeding them
it's not meant to make a
basically get
profit.
devoured. Clam culls will seed because we have literally millions.
No, but you know what you have right now? You've got the individual that's just literally around the corner, that's looking to do a commercial production thing. If there is more production at our East Hampton, whether it's on Gann Road or whether it's in Montauk, if there's an excess of production there, I think like a farmer, okay?
Oh, I'm not sure what
And
you
I'm
mean.
growing as much shit as I can grow, okay? And selling as much of it as I can sell. So if there's a commercial operation around the corner, is there a mechanism on your present setup to sell some seed? Where,
Right, like I
sell
said, we
seed.
we
They sell some
sell
seed.
our excess oysters.
yeah, no, I think
And
that's great.
actually, last year, he bought a whole bunch of them.
And if you're losing 50% of your scallop stock on a transfer,
That's not much
Well-
else you can sell.
Well, that's all the less that you can sell, and to me, you wanna put a hard value on that for the simple fact that, hey, if I could capture my initial set and reduce my losses, well, there's where your surplus comes, which enhances your revenue stream.
I think one thing you have to
Down the
keep in
road.
mind, especially with scallops, is that the primary, scallops, it's really hard to make money on scallops. They're really hard to grow. They're very delicate. The losses are huge.
So that's not, they're
Part
not
of the
being
re-
lost because of the transfer.
There's losses on top of transfers.
Yeah.
Or transport loss are on top of normal loss, but normal loss of scallops is higher than clams and oysters. But the primary reason for growing scallops, our primary reason for growing scallops, is to try to kickstart a natural population. It's a little different than oysters. Oysters can be almost dealt with on a put and take basis. You know, we put them in, you take them out. We put more in, you take more out. I mean, look at the Cornell program, which has been going on for a long time. They have a very big system up in Orient Harbor. And that's really was developed to try to kickstart a population. They've claimed that the return of the scallops in, I don't know when it was, 2009, 8, 10, sometime like that, was as a result of all these public seedings. But that's not necessarily something you can put an economic, or direct economic value on. Trying to reestablish a natural population by putting enough spawners out there.
No, John, I
to
wasn't
create
talking
a-
about that. I'm talking about when you're having losses, they're real. They have a tangible value. And in making your case for the Gann Road site, to me.
At the
you have
stage
to-
that we're
you
losing
have-
them, they're really not worth much at all, because they're
Yeah.
literally about a quarter of a millimeter. It's once they, like everything else, your small plants are worth a lot
Yeah.
less than your larger plants.
That puts it in the right frame of mind
Okay.
for me.
I always like the terrestrial examples. Okay, and here's, so this is just the cost savings for just the driving back and forth, just the labor, the fuel, and it came to what Mark already mentioned, $230,000 over 10 years. This doesn't touch on, other things like breaking up the workday, productivity, vehicle maintenance, repairs, emissions, and the cost of the truck. We could get rid of one of our entire trucks if we consolidated to the site. Again, so consolidating would reduce shellfish losses, reduce annual and long-term costs due to labor, fuel, and vehicles, enhance our efficiency in management. Like I mentioned, we're in this very old building with relatively old energy systems, so newer updated energy systems will increase our energy efficiency, provide enhanced educational opportunities, which you really can't put a value on, just being more centered in town as opposed to out in Montauk, where a lot of schools just simply can't get to during the school day, and community members. A lot of people don't necessarily want to drive out to Montauk, as nice as it is. So we think that the more centered location would help that. And like I said, many non-enumerable benefits such as emissions and, like I said, the educational opportunities. Let's get into some of the more policy issues, which I think you are all familiar with. The LWRP mentions the Shellfish Hatchery specifically. The town Shellfish Hatchery is part of an active effort by the town to preserve traditional inshore fisheries by renewing public shellfish resources. The hatchery has played a meaningful role in providing continuing seed stock. In the future, the town may wish to consider expanding its definition of aquaculture from shellfish and finfish to include other forms of aquaculture, et cetera, et cetera. Further development of commercial finfish, shellfish, and crustacean resources in the coastal area by maintaining adequate stocks and expanding aquaculture facilities. Lake Montauk Watershed Management Plan recommendations mentions the Shellfish Hatchery by saying that to continue to fund and expand the town's Shellfish Hatchery and seeding program, including eelgrass protection and restoration. From Long Island's Future Economy, which is kind of one of the publications that goes along with the grant application for the economic development aspect. Preserving fisheries and aquaculture is one of the critical issues in this Long Island's future economy. It mentions that fisheries and aquaculture are important economic activities on Long Island. There needs to be greater infrastructure development for the fisheries and expansion of bay scallop fisheries. Failure to invest results in a declining or stagnant marine production, and failure to invest will limit the ability of Long Island's fisheries to compete. Okay, now to 36. Yes.
You've shared two documents perspective on the future of the hatchery. Do you have anything that you could personally add to that? Like, what's your vision for this effort? You know, because you're the main guy, you know, that's driving this, or the program, not the building. You know,
right.
But what do you see as you know, some of the key points or benefits, so to speak, of this project?
Well, I think when this property first came up and David told me about it, I mean, honestly, I thought it was too good to be true, just simply because the nursery is already there, and as opposed to moving both nursery and hatchery, nursery's already there, so it would just entail moving the hatchery over. And I've always migrated toward the educational aspect in pretty much every job I've ever done, from teaching people how to wrench on bikes to teaching people how to grow shellfish. It's really a rewarding part of the job, and I think this facility, between being more centrally located in town and having both aspects of the production at one place, to be able to do all those levels of our work at one location would be a really great asset for the town. And we do a lot of group tours with kids, and I think it's to be able to have all this stuff at one location to teach them the whole stage, because the hatchery stage on its own is a little bit abstract. There's a lot of microscopy and, you know, bubbling tanks of colored algae food, and then to be able to show them the actual seed, it kind of puts it all in perspective. Yeah, and plus, you know, it's I think just anyone with a work ethic doesn't want to necessarily waste time, and that's what personally gets to me also, is, you know, just having
The disconnect.
the disconnect between the two locations and
If
an
I
hour
could-
in between.
If I could just add,
Yeah.
that having the educational aspects, the other educational aspects there of water quality improvement, what natural resources is going to bring to this. Also, it's a one-stop shop for, you know, water quality improvements and benefits that I think would, you know, influence people that were there to see it in more aspects than just growing shellfish, and what their benefits are for the harbors.
Orly, what's the size of that lot?
I think it's 1.1.
And it's immediately adjacent to the commercial dock?
Yeah, it's immediately adjacent to the nursery
Mhm.
here, Marine Patrol building, the commercial dock.
So we're really
There's a
looking at a,
little parcel here that's privately owned.
mhm,
It's used as an access to the harbor,
mhm.
and there's a nature preserve to the south,
So we're looking at a 1-acre expansion of the dock? Okay.
basically, yeah. And the nursery, yeah.
Mhm.
And that's the existing house that's on the property?
Yeah, that's the house that will remain for the offices and educational space.
The pool stay?
Pool's going,
So you're gonna have that
But
house
you're
on the
gonna use
property, and
that.
how big is the new?
about
building?
5,000, give
So
or
it's
take.
that
I'll
house
get into that.
plus the-
You wanna
Okay, that's
eliminate
coming up,
that.
okay, I'll wait, thank you.
So we just
Boys are that
covered
far.
this, all the contiguous neighbors. So back to the acquisition stage, Water Quality Technical Advisory Committee reviewed and unanimously approved the purchase back in May of 2018. Property was examined by many of the town officials for its condition and possible utility budgeting. Public hearing was held on August 2nd, 2018, where many spoke in support of the purchase for the stated reasons. So another great picture. See the nature preserve, narrow private lot. Harbor.
So at that time, the stated reasons were for,
Oyster Garden. Pardon?
what were the stated reasons in 2018 for the?
The stated reasons are stuff that I'm going over here
Okay.
and upcoming also. So this is some of the stated reasons. So, like John said, it'd be kind of a one-stop shop, a conglomeration of all these water quality improvements, plus the hatchery itself. There's hopes for a bioswale, permeable reactive barriers, injection wells, the innovative alternative septic upgrade, including pumping the Marine Patrol septic up to that system. Solar panels, keeping the native vegetation going. There's some nice cactus in there and some dune ecology on the harbor side of the house. So this image here is kind of a general idea of where the proposed building would go.
You got 5,000 square feet?
Not sure if that's the scale, but there's plenty of pictures coming up that are to scale.
To that size of the facility of 5,000 square feet on a 1 acre lot currently in our zoning code, do we have, what is the current residential size property that could be built there had it not been a CPS fund?
You got an acre piece of land, you can build a 5,000 square.
Exactly,
house on it.
exactly, if not more.
Was that?
It
If you got
could
an
be,
acre piece of land, unless it's encumbered by setbacks, you can build a 5,000
Right.
square foot house on it.
yes, so that's my point. It could, and it could even be larger.
Well,
Just going to go through the.
I apologize for leaving in the middle of your.
All right.
Sorry about that.
Just going to go through the actual grant process that we went through. So in 2018, we actually applied for this, we applied for the grant, similar grant. And that included, so it went to the LWRP section of the consolidated funding application, as well as the Empire State Development section. And we ended up being rewarded with the Empire State Development section, and that's the $400,000 number that you hear. $175,000 of that is just for the engineering and design aspect, and the remainder is for some site prep, such as removing the pool, making the house ADA compliant. So 175 for engineering and design,
Barney,
about 400.
Is that grant process the same as the current grant process?
Yes.
Or did the town have to commit to spending that money before it got the grant as well?
We didn't, and part of the reason we didn't get rewarded the LWRP section, which was for the assistance in construction, was the property wasn't purchased yet, and for some reason the budget upload didn't go through. But the property being purchased now is a big plus for the grant. That's a major, basically what they want to see that the town is committed to doing the project, that the town might do it on their own, and it's not just throwing money out.
And the amount of money the town spent on purchasing the property goes towards that commitment?
Yes, and that's going to be on here somewhere, but basically, the property cost 2.1, and the town, 1.4 of it was purchased through CPF water quality, and 700 was bonded for the house, so that the house could be kept, because otherwise, if it's all purchased with CPF, then the house gets demolished, right, and the septic yanked, and that's, you're removing one septic system from nearby the harbor. And that's another point, is that there's a lot of talk about how this project will and will not improve water quality, but you have to realize that if this property were just purchased and the house demolished and then one septic removed, then it's just one septic that's been removed. So all the other aspects of the property, the other water quality aspects of the property, there will be more of a water quality improvement on the harbor. So in December, we were awarded the $400,000, and like I said, 175 of that goes for design and permitting, and some of the preliminary construction.
Do you know how much has actually been spent at this point?
Very little. Most of the work that was done, the McLean had just signed their contract, and the details hadn't been worked out on those contracts yet. So I actually just asked David what had been spent, and I'm not entirely sure. It's not all the 175, because we're still in the design process, and a lot of the permits
400,000.
haven't been, pardon?
It's not 400,000.
No, it's not going to be.
I
The only-
keep hearing that 400,000's already
Right.
been spent.
The only, it's 175 for the design and permitting, and a lot of that is still in the future. The design that we have now is purely in the proposal stage, and it could easily change.
Total cost on the project, construction, not purchase, total cost for construction's 2.6.
Yes,
What was the purchase cost on the property?
2.1.
Okay, so 4.7 into the property. What's the plan for the old hatchery property if you guys move to Gann Road? Is that gonna be surplus property? Is the town gonna sell it to
No,
mitigate
town will keep it. We'll actually still continue to use some of it for storage, because we use about 2,000 or 3,000 square feet just for gear storage, for the stuff that we use in Nape. So we'll continue to use that for storage. And in the past, we've leased about 2,000 square feet of it, the east end of the building. So that will continue. Right now, it's under renovation because of a mold issue. And the remainder, the lifeguards store equipment there, they'll use it.
Is there any sort of plan in place to improve the maintenance on both of these properties? Because the one glaring thing, I gotta tell you, is both of these facilities, when you pull up to them, it looks like you're going into the ghetto. I mean, there's crap everywhere. And you know what? As a taxpayer, I don't like seeing that. I think it's awful, okay? Because you know what? You're running an operation, it should be run clean and neat. And I would hope that if we spend $2.5 million on a building, that 5 years later, it doesn't look like the old Ocean Science Lab.
Yeah, I agree. And, I won't get into the, we're responsible for mowing the lawn out there.
No, I get it.
Much time to
Because
do
it's not the only town-owned facility, but clearly, when you have these properties, you have to build into that, the maintenance and repair.
Yeah, and that's why when we originally met at the house, the Parks and Buildings and Grounds guy was there, and they're going to be kept in the loop. And again, it's closer to all of them and all of their facilities, so it will be upkept, for sure.
Yeah, I have to say, the Montauk Hatchery never had the luxury of having Parks Department come out and take care of it. We had to do that all ourselves.
Barley, question for you. A question that has been raised by a board member about the septic system, that it was not on the proposal. Where are we with the septic system? And I know it has to be the upgraded low nitrogen product, but have they moved forward in that planning aspect to determine where the new septic will be and how much impact it might have on the harbor?
Still working on that because of the water. There's a possibility that county water will be brought in, and that would alleviate the proximity.
If
to
county
the
water
wells.
were to be brought in, would that also facilitate the neighborhood on Babes Lane?
Should.
The residents would have option to hook on to that if they wish to do so? Okay, so that's in the proposal stage, which I think a lot of people are saying it's a done deal, but without
It's all
having a
still being
design
worked out.
approved and the proper procedures that we normally follow, which we will as a town, I'm sure that they will be properly followed, that we will have a plan that is accepted. And so that's important.
I won't ask the question, but will ask you this question. I'm assuming you're going to talk about the planning stages from here on in.
As much as I know, I'm really here to talk about the facility and the need. The town board that's really their wheelhouse, if you will. But I know that it's going in front of the planning board next month, which is, next month is next week, surprisingly enough. Let's see, where are we? 2019 grant application, as was discussed back in March 12th. After our application last year, we spoke with folks at the DOS who are in charge of this grant, we were highly encouraged to reapply. And that's part of the reason why we did. If they told us, no way, it's not going to go, we wouldn't have applied. But because, like I said, the property wasn't purchased yet and that budget somehow didn't upload, we were docked points and didn't get the award. But again, they highly encouraged us to reapply. So let's see, I don't want to dwell on all this stuff, but and we talked about this grant, so the Gann Road parcel will be part of the match on the grant, which is significant. So there's no more money out of pocket for the
So does that mean that the figure Jim cited, roughly $5 million total for construction and the purchase of the property, that the purchase of the property amount can be used as your match?
Right.
So the money coming from the grant will, in effect, all be used for construction?
Right.
And how much is the total grant?
2.6.
Oh, wow, okay.
Right, so it's basically 2.6 plus 2.1. You get 4.8, give or take.
So bar construction would begin in late 2020. When did the process start for
The,
the project? when it was
considering this
first
site
conceived?
was sometime last year, early to mid last year.
2018 to 2020.
Right. Oops, okay. Two displays here. I talked about this. This is basically about the phone conversations we had with Elizabeth Muehlman and Caitlin Smith, who encouraged us to reapply, and just talking, and how we've been working with Nicole Facito, who's our grants coordinator, on getting the grant in. About all on that slide. So the design and development actions, this has somewhat been covered. L.K. McLean Engineers, who's basically on contract with the town, has been engaged. Bates Massey, town planning staff, Natural Resources Department, Marine Patrol, who would also benefit from basically having a workshop right next door to their facility. Finance Department, area residents, and commercial fishermen. So on that point, I want to quell another rumor that the storage at Gann Road will be going by the wayside, which is absolutely not the case. There's some gear there that's obviously been left behind, so there might be some effort to get rid of that. And in fact, given all the overgrowth that's come from this property, if that's trimmed back, there might be some more storage space that's actually revealed. There might even be, between getting rid of derelict gear and clearing some of that foliage, there might actually be more storage space. So the commercial guys are not going to lose that storage space. More on the research and development actions with L.K. McLean, Paul Massey, and his crew. We visited the hatchery out in Montauk and the new Cornell facility up in Southold, and just tried to look at the big picture, looking at Gann Road and the needs there and the constraints at the Montauk facility, talking about the sizes of the facility that we need, energy efficiencies, the flow of a potential facility, talking about the base flood elevations, and how the design would affect the views from the water side, how the design and massing would affect the character of the neighborhood. All things considered by engineers and architects and those of us working on the project. You guys have all seen these pictures before. This is our existing hatchery, brood stock, some algae culture, mass culture upstairs, the hatchery in the bottom center there, and some of the tanks in the back area. Next slide. So basically what we did was just broke down all the sections of the hatchery, broke it down to square footage. What we currently use now out in Montauk is 7,581 square feet. And what we're hoping we would end up downsizing to move to the new facility, partly because the office space would be in the house. Office space doesn't amount to much, but that helps. Our current breakdown with, our current laboratory is much too large. We downsized that. Some of the food production areas we're trying to increase because we're always limited on food. Most hatcheries are. It just gets to the point where you can't grow enough food for these shellfish, especially oysters. So basically we came down to a bottom line of about 5,500 square feet give or take, for all the different components of the hatchery. Again, all proposed, could be is flexible.
Now, is this gonna negatively impact your production?
No. If anything, it'll increase it between gaining the time in the day, utilizing some new technologies that we're constantly learning about at other facilities. I would expect to increase it, if anything.
Okay. Now, is there any, you know, I mean, it's great. Paul Massey's a great architect, but, you know, for a commercial building, did we look at basically a steel building, like a Morton type building?
Yeah, nobody really thought, well, steel is obviously an issue with salt water, but
Well,
for the appeal, for the curbside appeal, Morton,
yeah, well, I granted, it's not a lot of curbside appeal. I'm just thinking about, you know, engineered panels versus, you know, something that's
I think I saw
cost,
this.
I'm thinking cost per square foot, actually. is
well,
what I'm thinking.
it would definitely be more inexpensive, but it wouldn't be,
Wouldn't look nearly
Right.
as neat.
no.
I watched the town building where the engineers described the design, and they had a model, they made a model, and
Yeah.
a lot of it, the design is sort of based around minimizing the view of the place, so it's kind of,
Okay, so this is the design of the building was driven to basically be a good neighbor?
I
Isn't it
think-
also
I
going
just
to
saw
have
it,
I've got pictures of the model.
plantings on it and be kind of hidden away as though it's an
Yeah,
underground
we've got,
facility? So that's why you're calling it Green Center in addition?
yeah, we'll get to that. We're almost done here. So this is the Cornell facility in Southold. Took a visit up there, just so, mostly so the architects and engineers could get a better idea of what's involved. You know, it's kind of it's a different project. All the,
What's the purple?
these spaceship-looking things are algae bioprocessors.
LEDs,
They, pardon?
look like LEDs.
Look like rocket ships, but they're quite expensive, but they grow a lot of algae. But this is the new bag system, which we just got, which is better than our old system, but being relatively stingy, I wouldn't necessarily go for the rocket ships. They really grow a lot of algae, but the problem is you can only grow one species at a time inside each, so you really need to have 3 or 4, otherwise you're pretty limited. So this facility, as you can kind of tell, is a Morton. We should have gotten an outside picture, but
That's really why I'm asking that question, because the style of the building, the insulation quality and all that stuff, granted, the buildings are designed for, 30, 40-year life expectancy, but, you know, there's a reason why you're a farmer, there's a reason why farmers build stuff like Morton buildings,
right.
because on a cost basis.
Yeah, it's definitely less expensive. So just more photos of the open floor layout, the plumbing on the ceiling, setting tanks, just another, it's good to see at least one other way of doing it, because there are many ways. You go to a different hatchery, you'll see different methods at each one. Some of the design meetings, some photos from the water. This is the existing house here. This is our nursery building, Marine Patrol. Okay, getting there. So again, took a global look at the town's properties and departments at Gann Road and how the project could be designed to advance the operations of each. You know, like I said, including Marine Patrol and giving them a workshop space to work in the middle of the winter. Plan for the design of the facility that would be forward-looking for, like you said, 30 years, FEMA flood levels and maintenance costs. And also, we wanted to try to allow for growth within the aquaculture sector. So if we're tasked with doing other things, such as kelp or other shellfish, that would have the space to do it. Decrease the massing of the structure as much as possible to keep within the character of the neighborhood, scenic views, location on the property for structure and egress, use of vegetative screening, create a design that is environmentally progressive as possible, which you'll see when it's pretty progressive when you see the pictures. Keep it energy efficient within the mission of the Green Center, using architectural vernaculars that would be within attractiveness of the current neighborhood, and design for construction costs, obviously keep it within budget. Okay, now pictures. So this is just a picture of the survey, and I want to point out one other thing. So that the survey tape that has been mentioned in the past that's in the trees, that's because of the survey. That's got nothing to do with tree removal. Plenty more pictures coming. So again, the entire parcel is in flood zone X. Current structure first floor elevation is at 12.3 feet. The current structure's basement slab is at 3.5, which is a little precarious. The property as is slopes from 12 feet to 5 feet from east to west. So through thinking about this in a methodical process, the proposed, emphasis on proposed, new structure slab would be at an elevation of 7 feet, which we think would be storm resilient, and obviously decrease the massing and potential for viewing from the neighborhood. Zone Residence A in a harbor protection overlay district. The parcel is located within the 3 Mile Harbor scenic area of statewide significance, and mariculture of semi-public facilities is permitted in Residence A zoning with a special permit. Probably need to get a DEC tidal wetlands permit. The current egress of Babes Lane would be abandoned. And global look at the town's facilities and potential sanitary upgrades, like I mentioned, tying in the Marine Patrol septic. Trying to maintain the greatest setbacks, and also design for those other water quality uses on the property, the PRBs, bioswales, injection wells, septic.
How does the CPF purchase dovetail with this use as allowed? That's an allowable use under a CPF purchase?
Yes, sure is, especially, given all the water quality additions to the property. So these are just some of the ideas, of where our idea came from. You can kind of see this grass roof here, mounded up on the side. It's really kind of concealed. Grass roof here. This, just imagine aquaculture tanks instead of wine barrels, and you kind of get an idea of the flow and the possible, educational aspects of an open floor plan. So these are some of the things that architects share to kind of try to put everything into perspective. So the existing house is 32 feet tall. You see it in both of these pictures. And the proposed structure, the maximum height of the proposed structure would be about 18 feet. So it would be 14 feet lower than the current structure. So, for instance, in this picture, you wouldn't even be able to see it from the water. Given all the trees that are around the property, you'd hardly be able to see it from any of the surrounding roads. Be a 40-foot setback off of Babes Lane and more than 30 feet off of Gann Road. More pictures coming. Okay, this one's more. So this one shows a more current layout of the actual hatchery. So you've got your existing house, no more pool, potential proposed hatchery structure, and again, all this storage would remain. Make sure that's, and here's our existing nursery. So this was obviously taken midwinter because everything's brown and the marina's empty.
So is the parking lot.
And the parking lot, yep. Site plan overlaid on GIS. So again, hatchery, existing house, potential parking, bioswales. Another view. Kind of the same thing. This one's got relief, so we've got mounding on the roadside to reduce the view, bioswales. And this is a conceptual street view. So, obviously just a single floor is the thought. This actually reduces a lot of the square footage because you don't need staircases and no need for elevators. This schematic shows the nitrogen removal as it flows through the area. Bioswale here, bioswale here. So this is basically facing Gann Road.
Burley, is there a basement in this structure or no? Or any storage space below?
This,
First floor?
no, so this is 7 feet above sea level, and it's basically on a slab, just because of the flood potential. Okay. So this is kind of the interior idea. Kind of looks like two buildings, but they're just side by side. This would be an entryway to a laboratory, broodstock conditioning, mechanicals area, a workshop. This is the kind of a garage area, and this is the workshop here. And this is where the flow of the hatchery goes from food production to larvae culture to setting tanks and transition tanks, and then basically out the door to the nursery.
So in terms of what would make noise, I'm assuming anything that would make noise would be in the mechanicals rooms? Or
Yeah,
rooms?
that'd be in the garage/workshop here, which is, as you know, we do most of that work in the wintertime, so the doors would be closed.
Is that on the water side? That mechanical room?
Yeah, this is the municipal dock area right here.
And, I mean, I know you don't have this fully designed yet, but do you propose to have basically the same amount of mechanicals as you have now? A couple of pumps,
Yes.
blower?
Yeah, basically it would take one pump at the nursery to pump the water to the hatchery, and then one recirculating pump, just like we have now. There's another ground level shot, existing house, all the stuff that I just described in the building, little access from the municipal lot, potential driveway off of Gann Road. Again, all still in the proposal design stage. Similar thing, this kind of just describes the flow. We go from broodstock to the hatchery stage, through to the nice boat, AKA nursery, and then same here, algae culture to the larvae culture, and then everything just kind of works its way out the door.
When you describe an education center, I'm assuming that's a classroom where we would normally come in and hear
Right.
from the various speakers. Is that in that large
That's
open
actually in
space?
the house. So the lucky thing about the house is the first floor where the kitchen and living room is very open.
Mhm.
And
So the original house you're
it wouldn't-
speaking of?
yes, the original
So
house
that's
that's going to
staying
remain.
on the property?
Yes.
Okay.
So where's the large machinery?
That's it, he just
There would be
described.
Oh, I
here,
thought,
Two
I
pumps,
thought it was an industrial factory.
two pumps and a
here there'd be
blower.
a chop saw and a table saw. That's about it.
Okay.
Here's a kind of relief model showing the flat roofs. Got your municipal dock, existing house.
Is the house at all attached to the facility?
No, not in this, not so far.
I'm just thinking
Not on
of
the proposed.
winter and inclement weather.
Yeah, I'll just put a coat on. Another model, again, existing house, proposed hatchery. Plenty of trees to block the view. And this is all, accurate, built up on this side to help block the view a bit. Trees are pretty accurate, given height.
Are those,
Another one?
I know it's not accurate, perfect, but are basically those trees there and staying, or are they gonna be
Some
planted?
trees are gonna have to be transplanted. I might have breezed through that, but there's a lot of nice cedar trees on the property, and the hope is to just transplant those out of the way and in a position where they'll block the view. Another view, so this is the dock area, access from the dock. Gann Road over here, Bay Plain on the other side. All right, getting there. So, talk about the traffic a bit. Our staffing right now is 4 of us full-time, including myself. We have 1 year-round part-timer, 2 or 3 additional summer staffs. A typical work day is anywhere from 7 to 4:30. Work during the summer season is mostly at Nape, and we spend about a day or 2 a week at the nursery. And so during the summer, the hatchery is pretty much shut down, and all the shellfish are out at either the nursery or the field site. Current parking at Gann Road is 9 of those double long spots, which is either truck and trailer or 18 cars. About 510 linear feet of parking along the bulkhead and asphalted areas. So that's 51 parking spots or so. The Green Center's users would be small to medium-sized groups. And one very important component is that most of our educational events are during the off-season, because we do our educational events during the season that they're actually occurring. So hatchery stage is generally late winter, early spring. Nursery, we usually do a spring educational component, and then after that, it's pretty much everything's out in the field. So the summertime traffic, I don't portray changing anywhere from where it is now, which is mostly us and every 3 weeks oyster gardeners. Aside from the occasional, maybe hopefully, and our hope being more center in town with this educational component is to have a school group or 2 come during the end of their school season, which, as we know, local schools go to about June. So that might cause a little bit of extra traffic, 1 school bus during the middle of the week. So the design continue, 1-story flat roof building, and again, 14 feet shorter than the existing house. Everything ADA compliant. As of now, the hope is to do kind of a green and vegetative roof, which would help with insulation, help with rainwater. But there's some questions about that, some issues. This is all in the proposal stages. Wood siding vernacular and use of traditional barn door accents, ADA access again, and like I said, transplant some of those mature cedar trees for screening purposes. The grant the deadline was July 26th, and we've pretty much all talked about this, about how funding kind of needs to be in place so that it shows a commitment from the town. Secret would be completed for both the designs and bond authorization prior to the new CFA application. That's all. Oh, that's the last slide. So I can't really speak to the SECRA process so much, because that's a town board's issue. I really can speak to the facility, how it will be used, and anything else on the shellfish culture front. So we finally made it. I'm sure
What
there's a
about
few questions.
DEC permitting? Has that been addressed yet? Or
I reached out to Wade, who's the permitting, just via email way back. And there shouldn't be an issue, considering we already have a hatchery. We have the nursery right next door. Any other questions? He's tired. It is 10 to 9.
Well, thank you very much for giving us this presentation and showing us the details, of which there are many, and still some things that are obviously in the works and in the planning stages of it, and it's a conceptual idea. I happen to personally think that it's a wonderful program. I've enjoyed being involved with your program and led by you, and have greatly benefited and seen the benefits to the public and to the waterways, which is why, as a trustee, I think it's very important that we, for me, giving back to the community is a way to give back through this program. I would like to, since we've had all this information, depending upon how the board feels at this time, I'd like to propose a resolution to support the Shellfish Hatchery. We did, back on July 10th, submit a letter of support from the Aquaculture Committee, which is comprised of Bill Taylor, Deputy Clerk, John Aldred, who's the trustee, and myself. And we fully supported the project and the grant application. We feel it's an integral part of our community, and offers a lot of benefits. And I won't read the entire letter, but it's available through our office for anybody who wishes to read it. Sure. So I have not changed my opinion as an aquaculture committee member about the value of this project. And, you know, it's a lot of information that has been disseminated this evening from you, Barley, and also from you as well, Mark, in terms of, you know, the differences of viewpoints. But I still think this project is very valuable to our community. And I think there's a lot of planning that's ongoing, continues to go on with the project itself. But you're addressing the environmental issues, and the need for this is wonderful. It's our community is all about the fisheries and about the harbors and keeping them clean and replenishing them. And I think teaching the young people and people like myself who were not as aware of what bivalves do for our waterways. I thoroughly enjoyed working with the children. I serve on education committee, and dispersing the seeds that we did last fall was wonderful. And there's much pride in this program. And it reminds me a lot of the South Fork Museum, where kids and adults learn about nature. And I always say people protect what they love, and we love our waterways, and we love the shellfish. I personally don't even eat oysters, but I grow them for the benefit of cleaning up the waters and giving back to the fisheries in our community. So I am at this time going to ask that we support a resolution to
Well, I don't think we're
show
prepared
support.
to vote on something like that tonight.
Okay.
I'd like to see a whole proposal that individually we can go through and evaluate, and come up with our own decisions.
Okay.
I wonder if this planning process of this thing has obviously been central to its controversy as it is. I wonder if we should ask maybe David or something to describe how this is proposed to go forward.
Because there's a bigger picture here. I mean, concerns I have is we're going from a 7,500 square foot facility to a 5,000 square foot facility. Okay, we talk about the latitude of being able to grow kelp or things in the future, but the reality is your ability to expand is non-existent because you've maxed out the piece of land that you're on. If you're talking about kelp, it's back in Montauk, I'm assuming, you know?
Yeah, well, you'd
Yeah.
start, there's a hatchery stage with kelp
Yeah.
also, but.
Yeah, but I mean, you know, I'd like to see a bigger, like, more comprehensive plan on this. It's really easy to look at something, get a feel-good moment about it, and I do value the hatchery. I think it's one of the best things the town ever did, but I would really want to see this thing see a project that's well-planned, well-executed, and well-maintained. And you know what? If you fall short on any of those steps in between, the opportunity to well-maintain it and have a lasting positive impression on the town significantly reduced. And we've all seen projects that the intention, everything was there, but you know, at the end of the day, if somebody had spent a moment and said, well, okay, how are we gonna deal with this? Because at the end of the day, Parley, you've gotta have a facility that's functional for what you do.
What are you looking for exactly?
No, I don't know. I just, you know what, I'm looking at this and say, hey, you know what, I'd like to be able to digest the whole thing, you know?
Well, maybe they're going through the process.
I could
understand
concerns as somebody that
requires-
has to run a
Going
business
through the
out of a
process that the
place,
town requires
to go
legally.
from 7,500 square foot to
I think what-
5,000 square foot.
Well, And that's,
I'm just concerned that.
I'm
you know,
just not sure what
Well, there's
We're
a couple of
asking
like
to be
discrepancies,
produced.
John, like that secret was provided, but then secret's gonna be completed. There's just some things that, you
well,
know,
that's a little different, I think, than what Jim's asked.
right, but I'm just saying there are some just missing pieces in the planning process that we're not even really close to understanding yet. And
Well, that's why I think, you know, I'd like to hear from David as to how that plan.
Absolutely.
What's
No, I
going
think-
forward, but I
think
get the
what brought-
impression Jim's asking for more.
The operational aspect that
we can
Marley
have-
brought forth tonight is excellent and has a lot of
and
promise.
that's what I think what my,
But isn't that what
asking
you're
for
asking
resolution,
for a little more?
we approve.
What's that?
The operational
Well, the
plans.
operational, I want, you know, hey, I have an interest in the operational plan, but I also have an interest in what happens to the other property. okay? Because you can ride around town, and we have a collection of properties that we have purchased over the years that we are completely unable to maintain in this community. And at what point do you really kind of balance, and this is sort of out of the realm of as a trustee, but more as a citizen, but there is a point where you've got to kind of reconcile things and say, hey, you know what? It's good to preserve something, but we also need to be able to maintain and take care of it.
Is that something you've discussed with the board, the town board, of, you know, the future use of the Montauk building, how it may or may not interact with your operation and?
Yeah, like I said, we'll probably continue to store some of that field gear there. Part of the building will probably be leased, as it has been.
Who leases
Other
it now?
departments? Nobody since Dr. D'Agostino.
Oh, okay, so that was the lease.
Yeah, he was
Yeah.
there for 25, 30
Yeah,
years.
yeah.
And then we had some mold remediated on that, mostly that end of the building.
I think some of the property, the land was also leased for private agriculture gear storage.
Yeah, we leased some outdoor space for outdoor storage. Like I said, lifeguards all the lifeguard stands get stored there. Some of the buildings and grounds, equipment gets stored there.
Lifeguard stands used to get stuffed over by Second House.
Yeah, and then somebody didn't like looking at those, so they got stuffed in our backyard.
Okay.
Have you ever had any, I mean, we never did when I was there, but have you ever had complaints from Rough Riders or Port Royal?
The only complaint was all the birds on the roof, which I can't do anything about because it's such a shallow roof that even if you put spikes on the roof, they'll just stand, spikes on the pitch, they'll stand on the roof. No, one of the Rough Riders guys said, "I don't want you guys to leave. I like having you here." Probably just because he knows what's there.
We had a great relationship with Rough Riders when we were there.
Yeah.
Yeah, I used to work down there.
The Ocean Science Lab.
Yeah.
Maybe next meeting we should get representatives from the planning department in.
Absolutely. That'd be great.
All right.
Thanks, Barley.
Thanks for having me.
Very informative.
Thank you, Marley.
Have a good evening.
Run through our stuff. Get out of here.
All right, we ready to move on?
Yeah, get started.
Okay, new business, Georgia Capons Committee. Application from Gray, owner of 17 Turbell Lane, Suffolk County Tax Map number 307-1310-3 for phragmite removal, rebuilding, and pre-existing wood walkway.
Okay, I just got this application the last couple days and just got this copy of the survey today. Clearly, there's a discrepancy in the sense that we've never collected any fees on this pre-existing dock, so we're at the very least gonna need to get some updates on the history of the dock, and I'll be contacting the owner's agent shortly.
Okay, do we know if a permit even exists for it?
For which?
For the pre-existing dock?
I don't know.
Okay.
We don't know the history on it, and that's,
Okay.
that before we take any action here, I wanna understand the whole story.
Who's the agent on that one, Jim?
That's Lori Wilshire.
All right, application of Z1 LLC, owner of 19 Chauncey Close, Suffolk County Tax Map 301-15-1-6 for phragmite removal on a wetlands restoration project.
Okay, this is much more than just a Phragmites removal project. This is the old Tiedemann property, which you remember about a year ago, there was a violation on mowing the scenic easement over there. The property has since been purchased by Z and Zahn. One of these is a house, one of these is a vacant property. They do have applications to DEC, to the village ZBA, and I believe Health Department. So I have a meeting scheduled with Jim Walker from InterScience, who is their agent, on Wednesday at 4 o'clock, so.
Okay, so both of these are,
Both of these are tabled, and
Okay.
when I spoke to Jim Walker and I spoke to Ackerman's office, typically on one of these, we're gonna wait a little bit of time before we act on this, because clearly there may be some modifications driven by the village or the DEC or both.
All right. Old business. Kayak rack update, Mile Hill Road and Settlers Landing.
Kayak racks are up,
And Mile Hill looks really good.
kayaks are on them.
We
So-
still have some derelicts in the woods there, but I think that by the end of the season, that should get cleaned up.
I was there Friday and they were putting the racks up. And I went there today and about half the boats in the woods are now on the racks, so.
Everyone's
Give
jumping
it on
onto
the
the racks.
weekend, maybe the whole
And we're
thing.
leaving that as sort of a grace period until we get into charging.
Okay, and wasn't there a small issue with the number of racks or something?
Well, we authorized 2 racks at Settlers Landing, 3 at Mile Hill. And Chris's guys inadvertently put in 3 in Settlers Landing and 2 in Mile Hill.
So
Chris
the
offered to put the 3rd one in Mile Hill and not charge us the labor for doing that if we would pick up the materials, so
It's pretty fair.
we thought that
And would you
was.
want, do you
So
want,
now we have 3.
do you want to use 3 and 3? And it sounds like you could use them.
I think they'll get filled up.
Yeah, I think
Mile
they'll
Hill
get
will
filled
definitely
up,
get filled up
yeah.
with 3, from what I can see
The only,
already.
the only thing we should continue to think about is what to do about the boats there. There's maybe 4 or 5 small boats, most 3 of them, I think, sunfishes, there's a little dinghy and something, but one of the sunfishes is now on the rack. I'm gonna have to make a sign and leave it for the guy.
Kayaks only.
But,
I think I know who owns that
Well,
one.
are we going to include stand-up paddle boards on these now?
paddle boards
Yeah.
on the sign, so I don't think any paddle boards went on the rack yet.
They're about the same width. The kayak's about 30 inches wide, as is the paddleboard, so
But I
they
think we-
actually would lay in there pretty.
I think we
pretty
discussed
similar.
opening them up to that.
Yeah.
Huh.
Yeah. But I think we need to think about how, if, and if so, how we want to deal with the boats. My
That's me.
understanding is that the town code now reads, you're allowed to pull a boat up on the sand. So there's no law against it. But I think we could probably, if we installed posts and some kind of a ring on the post.
They'd be able to
and
secure 'em.
require the boat to be assigned to a certain post within these areas like
Mhm.
Mile Hill. We could probably enact that requirement. We haven't yet, but
I wonder if it's possible to limit the number of boats. I'd be concerned that once you start accommodating them this way, that it just becomes
Take
a
up a lot
place
of
where
real
people
estate.
bring their boats.
Right,
you know.
storage depot.
yeah.
We
that's
just
a
play it by
consideration.
ear for the
Yeah,
moment.
we can, I'm just trying to look ahead.
Makes sense.
All right, committee recommendations on the revised, we did that already?
Yep.
Great.
Hey, on old business, did you guys have a chance, Susan, to do the Clearwater Beach, Hog Creek review on the permit?
Jim and I met with the head, James Gaffaro of the Clearwater Beach Association, and we asked him to go back and find out how much spoil they had actually taken out through Vistrian.
Okay.
So Jim and I are waiting to hear after they have had their meeting on September 7th to see what their overall consensus is, because we've discussed paying for the spoil, moving the spoil, and we're in that stage of,
So what, there was a kind of a disconnect with them this year or something?
well, they said that the last 2 years, they've not paid for spoil, so.
Well, but historically, they have, but
They have,
Yeah.
but my conversation with James Cafaro was that the board, he did discuss this with the board, and they're not very happy. So we'll put them back to figuring out how much spoil.
What do you,
well, we know how much spoil.
Jim is the lead on
We-
this
we know
negotiation, so.
how much spoil. We know how much they
I'm just wondering why
excavated.
I'm
and-
not included in that meeting? I wasn't notified of that meeting, being on that committee?
I'm not on that committee.
We called that we were
I
going to
am,
meet.
Okay.
but I was not notified of any meeting with James.
I think it was
I
during
think
the
it's under harbor
day.
management.
No, actually, it
No?
wasn't.
No.
No, it was
Okay.
on the Acabonic. basically, I was involved because Susan asked me.
Right, I was
To
never,
attend,
I
so.
was never asked, notified of any meeting. I'm just wondering why.
I'll have to look at my emails. Normally, I call you and I've emailed you and you don't answer.
I've
You
got
don't
no-
answer me. You've actually told me that you don't answer phone calls
I am.
or
No
emails.
notification of any meeting.
And we have discussed this several times at the meeting. I think, in fact, you were not at the last meeting?
No,
Right, so
but you had already had the meeting set up for that next morning, correct?
it wasn't for the next morning. In fact, I was away for a couple of weeks.
At the last meeting, it was discussed that you and Jim were meeting with Mr. Coforo that very next morning.
Actually,
But I
it was
had
in the
never
afternoon,
gotten,
but
whatever.
any-
I
Was that
just
too-
want to know why I was not notified of this meeting and
And also, I
advance
think
and
Bill
been
Taylor
asked of it.
was at one, is Bill on our, who is on our committee besides you and me?
That's it.
Well, it has to be Bill or
No,
Jim.
it's me.
Oh, it's Francis, okay. So then the decision was made to,
Look,
with
the
Jim.
dredging project originally went through the Harbor Management Committee. You guys ushered them through getting their permit. I vividly recall
Back in
that.
2016.
Correct. So it was absolutely appropriate to include Jim in this conversation. It was about dredging. It was not about property. And I don't know how you got caught in the middle of it.
This has been on the agenda almost every single meeting, and I've tried to resolve this. We did get the bulkhead approved. I'm sure you were here for that. And I had gone up and taken all the pictures. The next part of this, I tried to get approved, but we had the issue of the spoil. And that has been discussed since last spring, I want to say, May, June, July, and then I was away for 10 days in July. But this has been repeatedly, just like the properties on Watershed. That has been in progress for over a year now. So just tonight, we finally are able to address those issues with Billy Mack, so.
Somehow, I know what happened. When you went down to the site to look at the completion of the waterfront work that they did, the bulkhead and the walkway, that pile of spoils came within sight, and the questions started to be asked about that.
No, actually, the way this started is when we tried to close out that dredging permit, I asked the question of how much got dredged, where's the check for it? And if there's no check, what beach it was,
Right, but-
it was
That was
we saw-
discussed at a prior meeting.
But we saw the pile of spoils.
I actually went initially by myself to finish up to get this passed. And I'm not sure, because I don't have recollection of your schedule in particular, because I know you have different working hours. But I went up, I took the pictures of the finished bulkheading, I gave a presentation with the USB of all the pictures, and that was as far as we could go, because we had the outstanding spoil situation. Then Francis came, and we walked the property with James, and he saw the spoil. And then we went back to approve, to pass this, and there were more questions from Jim. So it has been an
It's morphed,
ongoing.
it morphed from the waterfront project to the spoils
Revisited the
deposition.
permit for
Yeah.
the spoils.
Yeah, and then I ended up going through the files with Arlene to see how the spoil was handled in the past, and so this whole history of this evolved and came out. But you're never excluded from anything.
And
You've been at the meetings that I have been
very
when
much
we've
been in the
discussed this.
conversation, but I was not advised of any meeting with Mr. Coforo.
Well, that would have been harbor management with Mr. Cofaro. I'm not sure how you were included in that, but dredging has nothing to do with property ownership. Has to do with harbor management. So,
And since I'm not familiar with it, Jim
so you
suggested
wouldn't
it.
have been notified. You're not on
I don't
that.
know, I'm gonna be honest, guys, the way I got involved in this was you asked me to weigh,
Right, but-
weigh in, which I.
Under the
but it's
Aquaponic
dredging.
Committee, which I am on.
Okay.
It was the dredging, it was the dredging aspect
In the
of the
future.
application.
In the future,
Let's,
hey, listen, the bottom line here, the way I'm looking at this, is these two permits have actually sat out way too damn long, okay? And if you guys are the members of that committee, okay, I do appreciate, Susan, you're trying to get it done, But we're not talking about 1 year's permit. We're talking about 2 years permits. And you know what? You both have been here for 2 years. And to have something sit out that length of time without action being taken on it is not it's not us doing our jobs
what's
very well.
what's
And
the solution from the meeting that
what
you all
what
had?
was the result of the meeting? The result of the meeting was that the president of the organization was going to go back to Pat Bistrian, who was the contractor on the job, and see exactly how much material he had excavated from there. If you go back to the permits, excuse me, which it's the same permit, has been issued 3 times, and it was based on the arrangement that went on several years ago, where a portion of the excavated sand was going to be used by the Clearwater Association on their beach, and a portion of the sand was going to be used by the Lion's Head people on their beach. Now, a few years ago, when this was done, there was some issues from the Lions Head community that they didn't like the quality of the sand. And what
Clearwater Beach didn't like the quality of the sand.
but Lion's Head was the one who basically articulated that position the loudest, as I recall. There was some, like, silt sediment or whatever. Somebody overcut the bottom or caught a silty shoal or something as part of it. But either way, it was a little difficult to collect the monies on this. Okay? This board neglected to charge them for 1 year, okay? And that was during your term, okay? So at the meeting that we had with Jim Cafaro, I made an offer to excuse that cost. That was our mistake, not following up on that. But we were not going to excuse the 2018 permit. We had some discussion about that. Mr. Cafaro was going to go back to his board and was going to reach out to their contractor and see if he could find out indeed how much sand got excavated. Because the comment made at the meeting is we did not excavate anything close to the quantity, and I don't remember offhand, I think it was 3,000 or 4,000 yards. We didn't excavate anything close to that. On the last excavation, it was much less. How much less? We don't know. We left that meeting with the alternative. They could do A, pay $7.50 a yard for the sand that they took, like everybody else does, or B, they could do somewhat what Devon Yacht Club does, where they distribute that dredge spoil on a trustee beach. We're waiting for some resolution on that. It will be cheaper to write the check than have the stuff moved, because it's literally going to cost about double per cubic yard to move that material to a beach than it would be to just pay for it. Now, that's one aspect of this. The second aspect of this in moving forward, this board has got to make sure that the applicant not only is living up to the conditions that we are putting on that permit, but also the conditions that the DEC put on the permit, and also the conditions that the ZBA put on those permits, because they're involved in this as well. So,
I wonder if going forward, maybe in future years, rather than leave dredging projects with each individual harbor committee, that should be its own committee, because there are unique characteristics to dredging projects that go from harbor to harbor, that if...
And they're consistent.
Like if a dredging project came to 3 Mile Harbor, I wouldn't know what to do. I'd have to go to somebody who's had experience.
That's precisely why I reached out and was told, Jim handles dredging.
Well, I had somebody,
took Francis with
I
me
was the one
to
that asked
see.
the question. I think you only called me
Right, so
because you
if
were
I
trying to
don't
shut me
understand
out.
something, I always go to somebody who does have the answer, because someone who's more experienced than I always turn to somebody on the board
But
that is
structurally,
knowledgeable.
I wonder if, we should think about next year, or the new board should think about, you know, not leaving dredging with each individual.
Well, and what happened is we did, actually, the early part of this was handled to a certain degree by the Harbor Management Committee.
I'd also like to make a point that InterScience was the agent for this particular dredging, and that's what kind of put a crimp in this, because when I went to James, and you were aware of this as well, I'm sure, because this goes way back to the spring, I'm trying to get this resolved, that they did not want us to go to InterScience any longer because they decided that Mr. Walker was no longer going to be
And this is-
representing them.
And this is also one of the sort of dilemmas that they have, because they were moving forward under the impression, because of a conversation that they had had with InterScience, who was also coincidentally Devon's agent, that we don't bill Devon for their excavation, and we don't simply because they distribute that sand on a trustee beach in compliance with all of their permits. Now, for years, Devon was paying for the sand because they were piling it above a bulkhead or something, which really didn't work well for them, and it was InterScience that negotiated that arrangement with us, and it's worked well. But they've got a nice situation in that when they do their dredging, it's very much adjacent our beach. They're able to offload the material, dewater it, and then basically grade it off. Clearwater doesn't really have, I shouldn't say they don't have the ability to do that. They don't want to do it for the simple fact that most of that material would find its way right back into the inlet.
Which is what James said to me during a conversation when he called me last week and said, reported back from speaking to his board members, that first it was our spoil, we could do whatever we wished to do with it. That's their position. Then, toward the end of the conversation.
That was only momentary.
Well, that was my telephone conversation with him, and then, toward the end, when I said, no, this is the rules, and I came up with from 2016 through 2019, the fees for all of the services that we have and all the permits, and it is the $750 per yard that they would have had to pay, because he asked me for this information, so I sent that to him. But at the end of the conversation, he said, you don't own the sand that has come from the dredging, because it was taken out, it was pushed in by the nor'easter. So on the one hand,
It's on
we
our
own
bottom
it and we
line.
can take it,
It's our
and the
bottom
other
line.
is, it
Well,
came
the
back
sim-
in.
The simple fact is, we're gonna get.
And that's where we are.
We're gonna settle the 2018 dredging permit. We're gonna come up with a some resolution on that. That's gotta accommodate all of the other conditions by the other agencies of their permit. And then moving forward, we have to have a set policy, how the trustees are gonna get compensated on this sand, or how the Clearwater Association is going to use this sand.
I agree, we should definitely.
And listen, it's a lesson learned. Contrary to what Susan says, I don't have any experience doing this, okay? I've just done work, okay? And this is just-
You wanted to
this
be
is
the lead
just-
person on this.
This is just, no, I
when
never
we
asked
spoke
to
to
be,
James.
I never asked to be the lead person on this.
No, you knew more about it, and you
Okay,
said you were.
okay.
Let's not argue.
Okay.
It's late.
I wanna go-
You know what? It's always good when we work together,
Yeah.
okay?
Okay, so
But
let's-
I just
we're
want to say,
working
on
together. Let's
on this
move
trustee
along.
permit, may I just say that the dredge, according to our permit, was approximately 3,900 cubic yards of material from the inlet to Hog Creek to, that's the other one, sorry, never mind.
No,
Let's
they,
move
all
forward.
of
Here's the
those,
right
no,
one.
all of those permits read the same cubic yardages on all of those.
Right, but that was for Hog
And
Creek.
it's gonna be different
All right.
year to year.
Here's Clearwater Beach Owners Association. The 1,500 yards of dredge material will be placed on the Property Owners Association, and 2,400 cubic yards of dredge material
That equals
will be placed on Lionhead Beach Civic Association.
Like I said, it's
But
the
all,
same-
the
it's the
directions
same-
are
it's the
here.
s- It's the same quantity on all of those permits. They allege that they did not take
As
a
much.
total of 3,900 yards.
It's
Right.
possible.
I have spoken to Pat Bistring, and contrary to what Jim Cafaro said, that they don't have any recollection, they did. And the number's 1,500 cubic yards.
All right, so from here,
So it's still under
It's under
negotiation.
discussion.
We'll work this out. I'm
Yes.
confident.
Okay, are
I
you
don't
still
think there's
involved
any-
with this project?
There's an incentive. I will be involved, but.
Good. I've learned a lot from you
Okay.
during this
I've
process.
learned a lot from you.
Okay, let's move on. Acabana Cog Creek, request to renew, this is the Savage property.
did.
We did
We
that.
did that, which is
Request to
Alcoa
renew
Roseberry.
trustee permit 318 for Simpkins, is that the same one?
Same one. We-
Okay,
we
great.
resolved.
Letter of support for
Why would-
applications.
Can I ask a question? Why
What is-
would we be writing a letter of support for any application?
We shouldn't.
We're not in the business of advocating for any
What are these
application
projects?
that's going before
Oh,
the
it's
board.
these projects.
Yeah.
It was a misunderstanding.
No, this is not,
Yeah,
this was
no.
to have been eliminated.
Okay.
That's a mistake.
Education, trustee outreach, East Hampton Chamber of Commerce Street Fair on Saturday, August 17th.
Wonderful time, we made some money, it's late, we can go home. All right, wait, and one more thing, I would like to ask if the trustees would they approve of a letter of support from the trustees to East Hampton Chamber of Commerce, just saying that we had it was a good project,
That I thi-
presentation,
that I think-
community.
I think the trustees would be
Can-
in that business.
May I make a motion for a letter of, and I will be happy to draft something and
I'll
then send it
second
to
that.
everybody?
All in favor?
Excuse me?
A review before it goes out?
Yes, I'll send it to everybody before, you can add your notes, but it's just a letter saying that we support the effort and it was a good project, and there's one coming up in the fall, so, thank you.
Anyone against?
Everybody, I'm
Everyone's
for.
against? Did you-
Unanimous.
Unanimous, good, thank you.
All right, 3 Mile Harbor, request to close out trustee permit number T419, issued to Laurel, located 29 Springwood Way.
Yeah, that's me. Yeah, that project's been completed. We received survey, pictures. It's as proposed. Nice project. They have some kind of interesting metal post in the ground, not wooden posts. I took pictures of them with my camera, but I didn't get them on here, so I'll send them around if
Are
you're
they on
interested.
trustee property or private property?
The posts, some are on the bluff face, some are at the base of the stairs, which would be on the beach. It's a
What are your
staircase
thoughts?
to the beach.
So typically we use non-treated wood for those? Is this a variation to the usual procedure, or?
Well, I thought it was superior. I mean, yeah, some of the, yeah, it's non-treated wood generally. I mean, there's old CCA posts in the ground.
Right.
This is, like stainless steel, or, no, it's actually probably aluminum.
Those there?
I'll just,
No, I think that's a railing, support for the railing. I don't think you can see them on these pictures.
Okay. I was just curious, because it just sounds like, kind of, just different from the norm.
I'll send the pictures. I have some close-up, took some close-ups of them with my, these are the pictures from
I
the
can't see what you're describing. but
agent.
What do? Are they marking the property, or they?
No, the posts that hold up the staircase.
Oh, instead of 4x4s?
Instead of 4x4s or 6x6 wood,
Right.
looks like a 3 or 4 inch round aluminum.
Is that
Tube.
common, Jim? Is that?
No.
No.
No. Be interested to see how the aluminum holds up to electrolysis and stuff.
Yeah.
All right, so do you want to make a
That's it.
motion?
Make a motion that we close out this permit?
I will second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Susan?
No, I said aye. She said aye.
Okay.
We busted.
Application from the town of East Hampton to replace the bulkhead at Town Dock located at 3 Mile Harbor Road, Hog Creek Road, Suffolk County Tax Map number 300-204-3-3.
I kind of talked about that a little bit when Mark was up there. You know, Kim is reaching out to Suffolk County.
Mm-hmm.
She feels as though we could propose a project that would be funded by CPF 20%,
Mhm.
that would address some filtration in line from the road drains to the harbor. And incidentally, that bulkhead is proposed to go up 18 inches.
No.
Okay.
Would you like this back or me to hand it?
Ultimately, we can discuss
On a-
that.
On an interior waterway?
Well, I found that ironic, yeah.
Well, that's where the highest sea level rise is going to appear, because it all gets pushed in there.
Well, I don't know. It's either that or it's just everybody's doing 18 inches because
Well,
you
can I
can't.
tell you what's happening? Is the DEC on a blanket rule, and you come in with an application, they're counseling you to increase the height of your bulkhead.
You go down there during a full moon tide, and
Oh,
it's
yeah,
like right to
it's
the
right
top
there.
of
It
the...
does come
Yeah,
to the.
I've seen where it's sloshing
Yeah.
over the top. Okay. Hey, do we have a set of plans and a survey on this?
On the town project?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Is there a timeline on this, John? Are they looking to break ground, or do they have a little bit of time on it?
I think October they're talking about starting.
Well, we could maybe distribute the plan and stuff, so we're all comfortable with it.
Well, I mean, I think that drainage issue is something we've raised.
Yeah, but my understanding on the
Talking to
my understanding on the
natural
drainage issue is that the county has a project of their own that's not really meshed with this, that's gonna occur at a later
Well,
time.
how it played out was I talked to Kim, she told me about the plan on the southern side. Then I talked to McLean, they're the engineers, they drew up the plans. I said, hey, we'd like to see some filtration in this thing. You guys just have the last 8 feet of pipe replaced, that's it. So he said, okay, yeah, and then I set up a meeting, McLean was gonna come out, see Cornell, Kim. Then McLean said they had researched it a little bit. They had found out that the county was doing this road project, and that it could be incorporated into that, but there's no assurance on anything there. That, it was just kind of, hey, this is not our thing, it's county property, it's a county job.
Well, maybe
We can talk about
maybe we
putting it
could be
into the county
Maybe
job.
we could be the catalyst to make sure that it is included.
I don't know if we can do that. I mean, I don't think we can approve an application from the town contingent on the county
Well,
rectifying a drainage
from
issue.
now.
well, in a way we can, because you know what happens upland of our,
But they're different
Bob,
parties. One party
I
can't be
understand.
responsible for the other.
well,
I think this way, if it works, is the best of both worlds, because if the county is willing to go along with this, then the town can fund it through CPF.
well,
So
but
you've
see,
got
that, I
partnership.
think we should just wait and see if that can be achieved.
But I think the only thing we can do, I don't know, but after that is hold off on approval of the project until we get some assurance from
Yeah, and are we
somebody.
going to start reviewing applications from homeowners based on what the neighbor may submit 3 years?
No,
Down the
no,
road.
I agree, I understand your point there, but, this is something where there's the opportunity for agencies to coordinate with one another, and if you rush to the approval on this, there's absolutely zero incentive on the county's end
Participate.
to participate or do anything.
But I think the county would love to tap into that CPF money
I think
also
they
to...
would too, so let's keep, hopefully
Mhm.
keep that whole ball rolling
Yeah.
and to a certain degree,
Yeah,
combine the
I agree. It would
projects,
be
at
in the
least in a
county's,
at least in a dialogue.
could be in the county's interest to have
Mhm.
this dealt with now and not have to include
Yeah.
it in their other project.
Mhm. All right, we have one more at Nape Lazy Point. Susan Noble came in today asking...
We don't need to do anything tonight on that. I have
No,
a
we don't.
meeting- I have a meeting with Susan Noble in the next couple of days to look at not just the sandbags, but also she may want to do some sand fencing and that.
Okay.
What about with the sandbag? What's she want to do?
I'm not sure. We're going to go down and meet.
Sandbags,
go
she's
over it.
been getting a permit every year to...
Patching them up, right?
All right, payment of bills.
Real
Yes.
quick, just,
Sure.
I did get a chance to review the BLM BOEM document on EMFs, and I'd like to talk about it more at the next meeting.
Okay.
So I just would like to get that on the agenda for the next meeting to discuss it further.
Right.
And I'd like to discuss an issue we had with the Roads Committee last week. We got an email from you, Francis, last Wednesday about the issue with Edwards Hall Road. And then when I spoke
I
at
was on
the
vacation last week, so
town,
I'm trying to figure out what.
last week, the week before, and then I spoke at the town board meeting, that the town board was getting ready to pass a resolution to allow the highway department to grade
Oh,
Edwards Hall
grade the road, Well, okay.
And I just want to know how that all came about without any board discussion or any board approval.
Board did have a discussion.
When?
Well, there was an email chain that went to everybody on this board leading up to that. And it wasn't,
I wasn't
saw
part
some-
of that email
Yeah, hey,
chain.
Susan, I saw some of your dialogue there, and you know what? There was no boogeyman in the closet here, okay? The simple fact is, I guess the homeowners petitioned the town to
okay.
do something about Edwards Hall
remember this now.
Edwards Hall
Right.
Road, okay? Steve Lynch, in his standard quip to that, was, listen, it's a trustee road, I can't go down there, okay? Steve did reach out to Francis, and that was what the circular was about. Would we have a problem if Steve Lynch graded the trustee road? I know I weighed in on it, I know Brian Burns weighed in on it, Susan Keeber, I believe you weighed in on it.
I sent down an email to the Roads Committee Friday afternoon. And when I didn't get a response at 8 o'clock on Friday night from anybody, I reached out to the rest of the board to see if there was any opposition to them
Okay.
allowing.
The only email I ever received from you regarding this was Wednesday morning, Wednesday midday, before the Thursday town board
It's
meeting.
amazing how many emails.
And
you
that
don't get
went,
when there's
and that
something.
went to myself and Rick and Dell. And I responded
it's
to
on my
that email.
computer.
Whatever chain email you're talking about that went through the
No, no,
board,
that
I
was-
was not a
That
party
was
of that.
Friday night.
I was not a
was Friday
party to
night when I
that.
That was
didn't get a
Friday night,
response.
and I responded to it, and I saw an email, I think, from you,
I reached out,
Susan.
I reached out to the rest of the board by text when I didn't get a response from the Roads Committee.
Okay, I don't know how I got it, but anyway, I responded to it, and the deal was, it wasn't like the town was looking to try and usurp our rights, our ownership, or anything else. All they were doing is giving Steve Lynch permission
Well, they were just,
to grade our road.
they were providing the funds.
If we were willing to allow them to do
Well, I
it,
didn't-
which we had already weighed in on.
Well, obviously, this board discussion was done via email, which is something I'm
There wasn't a vote.
under the understanding we were not supposed to do. David Lease informed me that
I told him that.
that you told him that the
that there
board,
would be board support.
the majority of the board supported this resolution, but I'm just wondering where that board discussion was, because I wasn't a part of that.
Because you didn't answer your email.
I answered the email you sent me on Wednesday.
Okay.
I got an email,
I will.
you and I got an
I'll print
email.
out the email and give it to you, because that's the only way you seem to get emails is if they're printed somewhere and then handed to you after the fact.
No, I got the email and I
She's
responded to
complaining
your
about you
email
not answering
Wednesday.
emails. You didn't answer my email. This is a constant
Because
thing
I
with
didn't
you.
get the email, and you just
Okay.
said that there was
Then there's something
a
wrong
group
with your
email
email.
going on. I was not
No.
a part of that.
What I said was when the committee,
So, Rick, were you part of that group
Rick did
email?
not respond either.
No, I got it late because I didn't check the email
No,
account
that's fine,
Francis
that's
sent
fine.
it to. You
But-
usually send it to my other one, and I don't, as timely a manner, check the
And I'm
other
not
one.
complaining, I'm just
Yeah,
saying
but
that when I
did miss
didn't get a
it. I did miss
response,
it because I don't check that one every day.
I needed to give the town board
That was
My
probably on
understanding
me.
was
An
that you
idea
needed a
of whether-
response for the
whether
town
there was
board
gonna
that
be
next
any
morning, and
opposition.
no one
Would
had
it be less
responded.
Right,
confusing
that
if-
was
if in the
Wednesday. I don't know what
future
he's
you
talking
send
about,
out
what kind of
text
emails, his
instead of
text
emails?
messages that went out
Listen,
Friday.
I'll tell you what,
That wasn't a
The
part of
bottom
it.
line is, you know, when you send
Text
me an
message
email, if you
received
send me an
was
email at 4 in the morning.
stated
get a
that he had
response
not
at
heard
5.
from the roads
But if
committee
you send me an email.
at all.
heard
So
email.
would we,
Or 9 o'clock.
did you,
in the
well, if you had
morning, good luck.
responded to him,
I
then he
did
would not,
respond to his
that
email.
night
Because you'll
or
hear
that day
from
would.
That same day, that's
Following
within
morning.
hours
You know
of
what?
receiving
Most
his
of the
email.
time, I'm not gonna have a chance.
Not
to
about
the
sit
road.
down
You
and
do
sit-
check your
Yes,
texts?
I did.
See your texts, right?
That's not true.
That's no
Yes, it is.
guarantee.
I can
Okay,
send
show
it
it
to you.
is.
I have it.
Probably more reliable
You
than
really
emails,
wanna
I would
get me?
And it was sent to myself and Rick and Dell. It wasn't sent as a group email.
It's called the telephone, and it's amazing.
No, we were not included in that.
No, I was trying to work with the roads committee, and I was getting
And it
no
was-
response.
It was Wednesday.
What always
And Bill
kills me.
still hasn't
received it-
responded either.
Doing
I received it
self-serving.
Wednesday,
I'm gonna send you,
the day before the,
well, it's nice,
um,
that's nice.
That's
If
what,
I'm looking
it
at
was the day before the meeting.
The day
town board
before
was
the
going
meeting.
to
The next
address it.
morning, they were
Right.
addressing it,
Yes,
so I
that's why-
responded
that's
to a
why-
text message
you're talking about
with the knowledge that no one had responded to the roads, from the roads
something
committee.
fried.
By
I
4
did
o'clock
respond.
the afternoon before, well, that may be a problem.
That was on, when was that, the 14th?
Are we close to being done?
Yeah, in a minute.
Okay.
Question, we're going to meet, Susan, you and I, on Tuesday at 5 PM.
That's Tuesday, September 2nd.
5 PM.
Yeah,
Okay, I just want to say that on the air. So
okay.
we have it.
You know, can I tell you what, don't insult me. by doing
That's not an
something like
insult.
that. Yeah.
No,
Yes.
it's
You sent the email to me, Francis, on the
I would
14th.
have sent it on the Wednesday,
Hold on.
Right,
hold
the
on.
14th.
Wednesday afternoon.
It was sent to Rick, myself, and Dell
Correct.
at 4:45 PM.
I
Right.
may have a conflict in that.
Oh, okay, well, I was doing that as much for me, so
My
I
date-
remember.
My date here.
I responded
My date here.
the
We may have a
next,
date
early the
on
next
Tu-
morning.
That Tuesday.
Okay, it's a good thing I mentioned
Working
it
an
then.
overnight shift that night.
date, Susan?
that day.
I'll adjust any.
And I responded back to you.
amenable.
hard to get this date.
Actually, it was 4
No,
o'clock in
no,
the
it's
morning.
fine.
I emailed you
Okay.
back the next
So that
morning.
was the
So-
next day. I had
I
been
merely
waiting
brought
for a
that up,
response
Jim,
and got
because
nothing.
for my
I
own
needed to get the
edification
message
and
to the
memory,
town
to write
board
it down so I go home on my calendar.
I'd like to talk about paying bills.
for their meeting,
Well, you
and I wasn't going to be waiting, so that's when I
Okay,
reached
so
out to
we'll
the
have
rest
to
of the
come up with a
board to
new
see if
day.
there was opposition.
Well, you sent an email at 4:45.
Well, that's when it was approached to me about it. I react when it comes to me. If it wasn't an issue that was being rushed, it wouldn't have occurred that way. Here are the bills. Montauk Anglers Club, 108.19 and 273.14 for pump-out boat gas and engine repair. Ready Fresh, $67.63. Chris Hamilton, $1,600 for the kayak racks. Skidmore Sports and Styles, Inc., $1,029.88 for T-shirts for the largest clam contest. Art Plaque, $548 for the award plaques for the contest. Staples, $275.55 and $502.38. Toner Inc. and office
I'd like
supplies.
to make a motion to pay the bills.
Us-
All in
Aye.
favor? Minutes, we don't have.
Thank God.
And financial report for the month ended July 31st.
I think we should table that till next month, because I really haven't had a chance to look at that closely.
I'm moving Tuesday.
We in favor of tabling?
Yes.
Okay.
Anybody have anything else?
Do you have anything?
I don't.
Okay, let's make a motion to close the meeting. Second. Thank
All in
you.
favor? Thank you, everybody.
Okay, thank you very much.